Everyone, welcome to our special board meeting for March 3rd, 2021. I'm calling this meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. The entire board is here. So now can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, hold on one second. Let me get the flag here. I'm still waiting for sharing right. So give me a second, Madam President. Here we go. Thank you, sir. There you are, Madam President.
Thank you. So can we please stand? Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for
which stands one nation
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Okay. As authorized by Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-2920 dated March 17, 2020, the Alvord Unified School District will conduct all meetings of the governing board via teleconference until further notice. The meetings will be conducted via Zoom. Spanish simultaneous interpretation is available via the Zoom platform. All meetings may also be viewed live on our district YouTube channel on the day of the meeting and are recorded to be viewed subsequently after the meeting. Pursuant to Executive Order N-2920, the governing board will take public comment. All public comments must be submitted in writing in advance of the meeting. Please submit your written public comments to superintendent@alvordschools.org no later than 9 a.m. on March 3rd, 2021. During the governing board meeting, written public comments received in a timely manner will be read for the governing board. Pursuant to Board Bylaw 9323, public comment period will be limited to 20 minutes. Duplicative public comments will not be read during the meeting. However, all written public comments will be provided to the governing board meeting to the board in advance of the meeting. So at this time, I know we have a couple of public comments. So, Dr. Kemp.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of reading two of our amazing students' public comments tonight. The first one comes from Catherine Linetto, who is a junior at Hillcrest High School. Hello, Superintendent Musarino, esteemed members of the board, and Alvord staff. Today, I would like to share with you the perspective of the high school students and my personal opinion as a high school junior, in hopes that I will shed some much needed light on the real issues facing the members of our district and create real change in the lives of high school students. The day my school shut down was opening night of the spring musical. I was one of the leads and had flown my grandparents out to see me perform. My whole cast was abuzz with excitement and nerves for the final product of many months' worth of hard work. And as we gathered together after school in our theater with the speakers overhead announcing the closure of all sports and club activities, we were shocked to learn that the very thing our lives had been revolving around had been utterly shattered. To say that I was devastated is an understatement, and it was mere grief that I carried on my shoulders for the months afterwards while school was in online limbo, waiting to see if we would go back before the end of the year or just wait out until summer in solitude. Now that a year has passed and we are in the same limbo once again, I have chosen to voice that all too familiar despair to help you as you make your upcoming decisions. The voice of this letter comes not from a frightened parent or concerned teacher, but from a student, the one in this situation being affected the most. Granted, this has been very difficult for parents and teachers as they try to navigate this new terrain and create new systems for us kids to succeed in, but I am the one who in the end has to succeed. I am the one who, despite all of your efforts, whether good or bad, has to make my life out of it. For you adults, the pandemic bringing a country to its knees is surely no small crisis. But for us kids, it means that the system that we have built our entire lives upon and taken for granted has disappeared behind a curtain that seems to be very easy to pull back, but as we have learned, is not. Gone are casual peers we could see every day and consider friends that changed every year with our different classes and passing period routes. Gone are the public yet private conversations we could have with our friends that weren't eternally on record online, but under the vague supervision of a few supervisors at lunch. Gone are the teachers standing over our shoulders, making us do the work that they had assigned because there wasn't a mute or camera off button to press that could get us out of having to have any kind of accountability whatsoever. To deny the benefits of social distancing would be redundant, as it was created to save lives, but its negative effects are often pushed aside and judged as unworthy of discussion because it will all be over soon anyways. I have heard that phrase and others like it many, many times, and it's always phrased in a way that is supposed to instill hope for a future and a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, since day one of this pandemic, when it was supposed to end in a few weeks, the light at the end of the tunnel has always been visible, but it's been torturous to be able to see that light and have the end of the tunnel stretch further and further away with every, we'll be back in a few months, we'll be back by the start of the new year, and we'll be back after this break, we'll be back after the start of the new semester. I know how hard you've all been trying to make one of those a reality and the kind of obstacles that the governor has put up to impede your progress, and I really do appreciate all your work. But this year has been astronomically difficult, not just for sustaining my grades, but also sustaining my mental health and stability. Having the choice to not participate or not turn in assignments has always been there, and it used to separate the A and B students from the C and D students. Now, participation is barely required of anyone, and those that do get the same grades as everyone, else, because assignments turned in late no longer count against you, and everyone can use the excuse of technical difficulties to keep them out of trouble. As a student who's always worked hard, earned my grade, and chosen higher difficulty classes because I knew I could excel, being put down into this expectation of mediocrity has been terrible. It has been terrible specifically because I have learned to sink to that level. I'm not held to the level I used to be, so why strive for it? I'm not expected to care or turn on my camera, so why would I? I struggle with this every single day, and it has made me struggle with other things in my life as well, like addiction to social media or the internet and junk food, because why would I not? There's no one seeing me every day, no one monitoring my progress in class every day, no place in society for me to fit into. So why even try? I'll tell you why, because I'm not that kind of person. I'm not that kind of kid, and I may only be 16, but I know who I am and who I want to be. And if I know anything, it's that while others may be okay with this level of mediocrity, I am not. I can strive for my unlimited potential, and I will, whether or not it is expected of me. The day that my social life, which was my whole life, came to a screeching halt, I was so completely blindsided that I cried for days and days. That first week was a hard transition, but I clung to the school's message saying that we would go back soon. Then, as the weeks after that came and went without returning to school, my hopelessness started to fade. That summer was my loneliest ever, and the uncertainty of the upcoming school year caused me great anxiety. Since those first few months, I've gotten used to social distancing, and I hate that I have. It's supposed to be saving lives, but how many are being damaged in the process? Last semester, I had at least 10 different days where I considered doing nothing at all, letting missing assignments stack up and just pass with C's. And that is 10 too many. It's really not all that uncommon these days to see kids give in to that. From what I've told you about me, you know how big a deal it is for me to say that I would have been okay with having even one missing assignment, and I hope that you can see how much seeing myself and my peers slip has hurt me. Aside from my work ethic, those days can put me in the dark place with my mental health as well. Every little thing can become a trigger for binge watching marathons of wasted time and potential. Every month, 13th through 15th, has been an anniversary of the last time I was happy, the beginning of an endless free fall into an abyss of Chromebooks and isolation. I started having a few friends over in my backyard to roast marshmallows and chat 6 feet apart during the summer, and it's almost been worse to be able to see them and talk to them, but with the dynamics completely different, without our freedom to be ourselves like we had at school. By the time we get comfortable enough around each other again, it's time to go until the next week's hangout. Recently, my instability has gotten much worse, and as we approach the 1-year mark, my lapses into depression and hopelessness have gotten closer together. The other day, my mom started to get out the St. Patrick's Day decorations, the first of many holidays that my family spent alone during quarantine. And it really hit me how terrible it's been since this all started, and it messed with my head all day. I tried to plan a COVID hangout with my friends to feel better, but when one of my friends said he couldn't make it, I totally snapped and yelled at him for being inconsiderate to my feelings. I apologized and expressed it was because of how I'd been feeling, and he understood and forgave me, but I'm very lucky to have such empathetic friends. Wandering around my house and going to class every day only to feel more distance and cut off from the world has really done a number on me, and it's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. People have used isolation as a form of imprisonment before for a reason, and while I know that it's not a punishment being inflicted on me, it doesn't hurt any less. I understand why our plan so far is to start with just reopening of elementary schools. However, the mental health of teenagers is grossly overlooked, and it's vitally important that high schools open too. Elementary students will have a whole decade to make this educational and social gap year up, but our time is running out. I have seen this not only in my class and those below me, but in that of my sister, a senior whose final year of public education is looking far more grim than mine. And as a fellow academician, her struggles have paralleled mine, but she has gone through it while trying to apply for colleges to study in biogeosciences to become an astronaut. We're trying to build our lives here. We're expected to graduate, to become adults, to choose our majors and careers soon. The fact that teenagers are treated like children and expected to act like adults is a soliloquy for another time, but the fact is that we don't stand a chance of achieving our unlimited potentials while confined to online learning. The essence of that phrase is that every kid is different and should be able to achieve everything they can and more. And for some, online learning does not impede that. Homeschools and online education have existed for years and for good reason, but one size does not fit all. One person's measure of success is not comparable to anyone else's, and if Alvord truly believes that all students should realize their unlimited potentials, it will reopen high schools for the sake of the students like me who are not only achieving far less than they are capable of now in this system set up for failure, but can achieve so much more in the future. I know that one or two or even dozens of letters like mine cannot change the numbers or the governor's goals, but I hope it can help kids like me feel heard in a world full of adults deciding things for us. And if anything else, it may help wedge open the door a little bit more to returning to school. It has been opened a bit already with the COVID safe practices and meets of sports teams of the Let Them Play movement, but what about all the other kids that don't fit in that box? If they have the green light to wear masks and participate in physical activities 6 feet apart, why doesn't drama or choir or band or even the STEM programs like computer-aided design that is trying to 3D print a car without their expensive district purchase printer and computer lab that just sits idly on campus collecting dust? After Zoom hours, there is so much time that could be filled making steady progress toward reopening and allowing kids to see each other, not just through a computer screen with the right RGB, but truly see them and rebuild the camaraderie that once was. If you truly believe in the motto and mission of our great district, you will see me and my unlimited potential waiting for you to let me achieve it. Thank you for listening to this very long message. I wish you and your families and every family in this district all the best. I'm looking forward to the light at the end of the tunnel, and I think it just got brighter. Yours sincerely, Catherine Linetto, age 16, Hillcrest High School Junior. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, our next student comment is from Aryan Gorbadi. Hi, I just had a few questions. My question is that can we do the rest of the school year virtual? And my comment is that why do we need to go back to school? And by the time we go back, we have less than 2 months. I don't have any learning issues with the virtual program. And I think me and many others think the same thing about if we go back, we can still get the COVID. So this connects with my question, if we can do the rest of the school year virtual. And the other things, is it possible schools not reopen until May? So until then, there will be enough vaccines for most of us, and most of the students could get vaccinated, so we will all be safe. And thank you for reading my email.
Thank you, Dr. David. I will be reading the next public comments. The first one that I got is from Christina Samala. Hi, my public comment is regarding the testing requirement. I strongly disagree and contest the proposed bi-weekly testing of our children. It is in fact child torture to forcibly subject 4-year-olds to 10-year-olds to be treated like a lab rat. It is emotional, physical, mental, and psychological abuse to put our children through that every 2 weeks. And when will it end? No one knows. There's plenty of reliable, fact-based data that shows our children are not the threat other sources have falsely said them to be. Also, there are published studies that show evidence that the classroom setting, along with the daycare facilities, have a very low minimal transmittal rate. Children can be quite transparent. If they seem off or look sick to any staff that observes them, send them home and let the parents decide whether to test them or not. Perhaps require a 3-day stay home before returning. I am pleading my request. Please do not subject our children to this testing. Thank you, Christina. Next public comment from Dr. Andokovic. Kids are more than looking forward to getting back to school, largely because they need the socialization that they've been missing and the personal interaction with their teachers. At the same time, when looking at the guidelines of weekly COVID tests and wearing masks full time while not being allowed to congregate with friends, this more than burst the bubble of excitement that coming back to school was creating. The science is showing asymptomatic kids are certainly not spreading COVID. We can be smart as parents and not allow sick kids in school. We need to allow kids to talk and play a little. Expecting small children to keep their masks on the whole time seems very difficult and not appropriate. I hope we can be a little more flexible on these guidelines. Otherwise, it seems that there is no reason to bring our kids back to school, and it will be easier to keep them at home or transfer out. Next comment from Amy Kelly. Superintendent Miserina. My name is Amy Kelly, and I am a graduate of the Alvord Unified School District, as well as a parent of 2 former Alvord Unified students. My children flourish well at their home schools, Lake Hills Elementary and Villegas Middle, and truly miss their teachers as well as friends, as I know many children do. My husband and I decided to pull our children out of the district at the start of the school year, as we were not satisfied with them attending school should it have reopened with the requirement to wear masks while at school, especially since our son has asthma. The science is showing asymptomatic kids are definitely not spreading COVID, and in my opinion is completely inappropriate. I believe these requirements need to be reconsidered to attend Alvord schools moving forward. I am also saying that the return to school guidelines also include weekly COVID testing. This is a violation of their rights, and I will not send my children back should this be required. As one of many thousands of parents who have spent the last year living through this extremely difficult year, I believe we can be smart and can make the appropriate decisions to not send our children to school if when they are sick without having to be poked or prodded. Our children deserve to go back to school to a place where fear will not be continuously instilled in them with unnecessary testing and mask requirements. I do appreciate the efforts of safety on the district's behalf. However, I do not feel they should penalize children's rights to an education for not following suit. I ask that my voice be considered, and it is also echoed by many other parents within the district. Thank you for your time, Amy Kelly. Next comment from Carrie Ramos. Hello. Please open the schools. My child and countless other children are suffering greatly from being withheld from in-person schooling. As much as the students and teachers have given it their best shot, online school is an utter failure for elementary age children. I'm tired of hearing about safety and fear. Every other country schools, state schools, and private schools in our own city have been open for months or never closed. It is safe to open schools. Stop playing games with our children's lives and futures. Stop using children as pawns in your own agenda. These kids have been irrevocably damaged because of decisions you've made. And by the way, this line from the superintendent's roundup was either a blatant lie or just grossly ignorant. Quote, in Riverside County, no school districts were able to put their plans to work since the county never rose above the most restrictive purple tier long enough to be eligible to reopen, unquote. The county was in the red tier for multiple weeks this fall, and this board chose not to act on that opening. Don't choke this time. Carrie Ramos. Next is from Carrie Thomas. While I support students returning to school, I and a lot of parents that I know do not support the radical requirements / guidelines that are talked about being imposed on our children when returning. For example, COVID testing, social distancing, limited class hours / days, and strict enforcement of mask wearing does not make it advantageous on furthering our children's education, but continues to do the opposite. What I would like to suggest and have been suggesting for years is to install more hand washing stations throughout the schools while also allowing extra time for students to do so. The science shows that hand washing is a very effective way to limit the spread of any virus. Data from other schools that are open and in other states do not show spikes in COVID-19. So why is our school district continuing to hold our next generation back? I ask that schools reopen without the strict enforcement of mask and COVID testing. If not, what you will see is a large majority of parents will seek other sources of education from institutions/instructors who fearlessly and genuinely care about our children's futures. Sincerely, a concerned parent. The next comment from Jennifer Savage. Why are we having our kids come back to school when they're going to be doing class that they're doing at home? My daughter has done great with distance and she is going to struggle going back. She is in 7th grade and is special ed and has ADHD. This is going to be really hard on her. And how is she going to get the help she needs if the teacher or aide can't come to their desk to help them? Why can't us parents get the option for them to go back in person or stay distance learning to finish out the school year and not virtual? Thank you, Jennifer. Now we'll pass it to Dr. Bob Presby to finish the public comments.
Thank you, Madam President. My first comment is anonymously submitted, and it states, "Good afternoon, Alvord, USD Superintendent, trustees, and staff. I'm writing to oppose any consideration of physical reopening of schools within the district for the remainder of this academic year. For the record, I am a certificated secondary employee writing anonymously to express my thoughts. To begin, I do not oppose reopening in a physical form because I firsthand see there is a negative element to distance learning in the manner it's been organized over the past calendar year. However, the manner in which it's being considered, I feel, is being rushed, giving little ability for staff and faculty of the district, as well as youth and the general public, to provide input in a timely manner. As of this day, of this meeting, it has only been 5 days since parents and families were contacted that an item of this kind was even being considered by the board. Only slightly more warning was sent to employees through the Alvord Educators Association, not the district. I find this to be in poor taste, and it gives the impression that the board doesn't truly seek input from the public or its staff, and that a majority has already made decisions. Instead of discussing this item at 2 different special meetings that were closed sessions, it could have been tabled until your late March general meeting and allowed for more public input. I understand that too, the special meetings probably were an offshoot of a larger agenda amount, but it does not give a positive impression to me or members of the public. Also, at present, the district leadership seems to also be going back on the MOU or models for reopening negotiated with the teachers union last summer. Some changes I can understand as situations and data have changed, but there seems to be an overall refusal to listen to educators and their staff this week alone. Are you going to keep up your work or reasonably listen to those who work for you to undermine them and ignore them instead? How can we as educators, staff, and the public trust a board that keeps making random changes and going back on its own word for the future? Before I state my points to oppose physical reopening to at least till the summer term, I want to ensure that the trustees have asked themselves rhetorical questions such as how that physical reopening is being considered for schools. Will you as a board resume meetings in person and allow physical members of the public audience to attend them again, or just only in Zoom? Have any of you worked in education at a similar time during a crisis that can impact health on this magnitude, or if in a different profession working in person during this pandemic? I feel since elected officials are asking educators and similar staff to end their time virtually, are the board members also in whichever line of employment or status they may be in? Are all of you truly putting yourselves in the shoes of educators during this time, or just giving orders you may not be willing to do yourself with little thought? Is this simply all being done because of public and political pressure only, or on a science and data which is changing daily? Have you been vaccinated at this time or be able to get in an effective manner? Do any of you have any underlying health conditions that prevent you from being in a physical environment and can relate to what a transition of this kind can mean for faculty and staff? I'm not sure these questions are being asked of the board members currently. There are numerous reasons I oppose physical reopening at this time. One of the first is that I do not believe the staff and faculty seeking to have themselves had the ability to be vaccinated, at least in full. My understanding is the district is not seeking to maintain data on who actually has been able to for confidentiality reasons. It did ask a survey who may be interested, but that is all. Has the data been updated to compare on how many have been able to be in slow the rollout provided by different levels of government? When is the district going to have a clinic for the staff and faculty it has offered since December? There has been no set date in all of this time. Thus, the board does not even have to make decisions with this knowledge in mind, nor is there a certainty of when it can happen. We in California like to see ourselves as more progressive than other states, but others such as Massachusetts and Texas aren't even allowing their teachers to become vaccinated. There have been situations where educators have been turned away in Riverside County too, are appointments difficult to get. Even though we are allowing it, we all still failing them on a certain level just by this fact alone. I do not expect all teachers or staff to be vaccinated, and as long as there is a strong majority who had the chance, it is not by itself a barrier to physical reopening. However, do we know as a district if we are even at this level yet? I do not feel that an April reopening date will give enough time for these dilemmas to change. As President Biden stated today, there will be enough vaccines for adults, American public by summer or May, but the rollout will take much longer than that. It will also be for Riverside County too. Data doesn't support large amounts of hospitalizations or at least mild illness of people under the age of 18. But physical reopening, I fear, will allow the virus to spread to adults who are vulnerable to the community outside of the schools. That puts the general population at risk. Vaccines for those under the age of 16 will not be developed until the end of 2021. I already had many students miss class regularly throughout both semesters to seek testing as precautions or because they had been infected themselves. I only see this as increasing for students who appear in person as disruptions. I do feel giving the chance for the general public to become vaccinated before this could potentially be a hazard. Already since December of last year, the secondary campus in which I work has probably had only about 24 individuals on it in person during the time of the virtual operation. 4 times since this period, the campus had to close and all staff leave the physical campus because that small figure of faculty on site had a positive exposure requiring quarantine. The majority of campuses in the district have had some type of similar situation at least once. I'm curious if members of the general public who will hear or see these comments are aware of this happening at such a level during the last few months. Us teachers do not even have the full or specific data because it's confidential. Again, as with warning of an item for reopening, this information was provided through Alvord Educators Association and not the district, except when it pertained to our specific campus. In fact, the secondary campus I employed at was only able to open 2 weeks ago for in-person staff because of the most recent outbreak. Students in the virtual setting were asking me and others why all of the teachers were suddenly not on campus teaching, but home instead. This is how much of a surprise it was to them and how well it was communicated. Construction has also recently started on the campus, which has caused the administration to ask us to return to working at home or remain there if we already caused a disruption to the general operations if we chose to be on campus. Were either of these situations well handled or organized? I do not feel so. It is certainly, however, that this will only continue a physical reopening even if mitigation is undertaken and as infection rates decline. Based on situations which have already occurred in the region around San Diego and untold school districts that have opened for either fully in person or using hybrid models across the United States, it is easy to predict that positive infections will be brought on campus by adults dedicated and required entire classes or sections of campus to quarantine, just as already occurred in Alvord during virtual meetings only a few days ago. I heard another educator in the Midwest describe 1,200 students at a high school she teaches at having to quarantine and go through this process because of a mild outbreak. This occurs because students are asymptomatic and don't know they are infected with the virus, or even have parents who send them to school not knowing or being dishonest that someone around them has tested positive at the risk of exposure. Most of the campuses reporting a quarantine such as this generally experience this closing and reopening more than once, but a series of times in repetition. It is highly disruptive not only for in-person instruction, but also for the emotional well-being of all involved because of the fears and exposures or rumors on the constant irregular changes. I'm sorry, my computer just froze, so I need to pull it up on this other screen. Can I take one quick break?
Go ahead.
All right, I have it now. Sorry about that. Comparison to these mandatory 2-week quarantines, which occur again and again, are like cuckoo clocks or a yo-yo to those affected. I already predicted with the volatility that has happened throughout Alvord's campuses, just through virtual and minimal on-campus presence, the scenario will inevitably play out, especially on secondary campuses, which have large number of students and are more dense. There are not currently a database on the positive infection rate or quarantine episodes on campuses that have reopened in person across the country. Districts are also either underreporting or outright covering up data as well to avoid the fallout of falling into follow their own standards and liability that comes with it. Intense pressure to perform or simple apathy could create this in our regional schools too. I would like to point out that the CDC suggests for physical reopening can be done, but in the southern, such as those found in the desert. There has also been much contradictory advice, such as while they recommend schools can reopen under ideal circumstances, they still also do so for ordering groceries online and having them delivered. No guidelines exist for those who have been fully vaccinated either, or if they significantly spread the virus without wearing a mask. Different levels of government are operating without commensurated data or incomplete data, including the federal government. Even at campuses that are operating in a hybrid model or in person, the rigor of faculty or students to follow precautions already established have been gravely ignored and caused some of these instances to occur just from individuals choosing to do this, including school faculty and administration. Throughout this year, I have heard students refusing to wear masks, keep distancing, or not be near each other. The masks often become toys, and adults are not always able to enforce the setting. Students who are written up by faculty for these violations are not handled at all by administration or face consequences either because they choose not to or are overwhelmed with the duties of concerns. Because of personal or political beliefs, there are adults on campus who refuse to follow safety guidelines put out for them by the health inspectors of their own district. Principals, school board members, and teachers are often among them. Believe it or not, who believe in many of these false myths about the virus, outright conspiracy theories, and other misinformation in these circumstances, which causes them to intentionally ignore the guidelines given to them. Teachers, in numerous instances, have been to quietly report to administrators and others who openly refuse to enforce cautionary measures directed to them, risking retaliation in different forms. It also creates liability for the district and negative publicity. There are administrators and district officials who will put on an act for inspectors coming to their campuses. They are following the measures when once these visitors refuse to. Not much can be done to discipline individuals like this because of tenure, which causes them to be more emboldened and apathetic to risk of students and public. In a rush situation back to school for only a few weeks, I could easily see this scenario unfolding either due to stress, poor planning, or individuals who never cared before the pandemic even began. Consequences issued to students have been severe in some of these physical reopenings. Parents may or may not want to follow the grouping they selected earlier in the school year to be virtual or hybrid. They send their students ignoring the rules and apathetic to the choices they made. Students pay the cost as they are suspended from campus, as this is the only consequence administration has to use. Individuals who do this multiple times are expelled, and a few arrested by police for trespassing as they seek to change their status or protest not being able to return in person. I do not want to see this situation play out for secondary students already struggling during a pandemic and a stressful change. Even if we were able to reopen, there are currently many substitutes in the district in general or have had left for other work during the virtual setting. Without insurance and other precautions, are they going to be willing to come into our physical campus and risk their health if needed for coverage, or want to go through the complex rigors of a physical reopening that regular faculty and staff will be stressed to understand the direct students for? I used to be a substitute teacher for Alvord, and I would say myself would look for another type of work that would protect my health until I was vaccinated or the pandemic ended. I find that the situation for others will cause staff shortages on campuses where we need them. It is through accounts given by teachers and faculty in other states have reopened in person, including campuses of individuals in the Sierras, High Desert, San Diego, and Orange County. These are not only staff shortages, I fear. Scenarios in many states, including California, where administrators need to leave their regular duties to teach 3 or 4 classes during the day for not being able to find staff replacements, even during a hybrid model, as do other teachers who are not compensated for these additional duties. In districts from the general operation of campus and needs of students, because many seeking to become teachers, substitutes, or other staff do not trust the guidance of districts making the decision to reopen, there are decreases in applicants for positions all over, and shortages are elongated. This could be from problems which already exist or after teachers and staff resign because they feel their voices are not heard. Another concern I have had is for teachers and their $500 classroom budget. It has not been confirmed to us if we're able for in-person instruction or not. We're also concerned about how we can spend the money, being in limbo decisions to return to campus or not. Those of us who have not spent any or some of this money are concerned that around March 17th, if it's not used, it'll be eliminated with no information about what setting we will be in is known and actually changing from day to day or minute to minute. Will the time we can use to budget be extended, or will it be lost and we will have either to spend our own funds to materialize your district classrooms being rushed decision to reopen for a month and a half or not? I already have taught several years where this has happened, and I do not want to spend more money in just a few weeks than during the academic year because of a forced in-person reopening or less than a quarter of the half of students normally present. What is the purpose of leaving virtual instruction if not many resources can be provided for an in-person instruction? Because the PPE, we will all have supplies we need. Will we have enough that will not put students at risk or safety? The reopening scenario proposed by the district gives only 7 to 8 weeks, very most, until the end of the academic year for primary campuses. For secondary, it might give even less. I believe this is too short a time to make positive impacts for students and will never undo a year of damage, isolation from school, or virtual learning may have done. I agree with the logic that harm has been done, but it will be years for repairs and healing, not rushing back for less than 2 months. April and May are already the months students start to look forward to summer months and not paying attention in class. Seniors either accept the fate they are graduate on time or not and lose interest too. This will only harm the process of physically reopening. Doing distance learning for a few weeks will be undermined by the summer break, where much learning and knowledge is lost anyway. For students who have been out of physical classroom for a year, this will be even greater. I have support full-time in-person instruction and would not oppose return in this matter if I had been longer, perhaps 3 months or a semester. But the district waited very long time to change its stance of reopening in the middle of January and didn't express a vision board members to do so later, even during this time. It will be a highly unproductive action. Because of this short-sightedness by the board, I do not appreciate the setbacks to the already challenge of getting students in a positive model for distance learning for the past academic year due to a rush policy or implementation because of the factors I have just mentioned and others. While students have been in a routine for virtual learning as much as they can, they will have the rug pulled out from under them for only a few weeks of another. They will unlearn during the summer and never learn at all as they are virtual in the hybrid model. The short length of 2 months or less will also be highly unproductive because of the distractions that occur mentioned above, but also the need to unlearn habits done during a year from having instruction at home. This is going to negate the emotional and mental health of students and staff, some already tired of the extensive amount of general changes during the year and who have the pandemic wall due to so many. Others, out of concern, they could become infected themselves or possibly spread the virus to others. I myself, as an educator, have hit the fatigue of the pandemic and feel like a yo-yo just from so many different political claims, actions or failures, and actions at different levels of government, from not closing for safety, to poor vaccine distribution, to individuals contradicting themselves or breaking already agreed upon commitments to the public and teachers. Reopening in person is only going to add to this situation. Grades will not suddenly increase for students, reading scores will not improve, nor will distracting behaviors in short time left in the academic year, if anything. Distractions and poor planning, as I have mentioned, will cause more disruptions and further undermine what teachers and students have been trying to achieve all year. Because I do not believe students and staff should return for the academic year, doesn't mean I do not for the next term, which would be summer. Students already are out of the system or preparing to start over anyway with a new learning environment. Summer with fewer students and staff can be effective testing ground for all levels of students and make sure when in person the precautionary measures work effectively. Nationally, infection rates are leveling off. I imagine this is probably because we are seeing the symptoms of those infected over people who went out and traveled during the 4-day week in February or Valentine's Day. There might be a spike as before because of this. Also, the viral infection rates may have decreased for present time, but careless activity by the public due to warmer temperatures, spring break, and later on summer may contradict the progress safety measures or vaccines have taken. We are already seeing states no longer mandate mask requirements because they are overconfident that they will no longer need them. This has already happened last spring and summer, which caused to decrease again. If the public becomes too lax on these precautions, it will undermine what vaccines have been attempting to do and cause cases to increase again. We may see the very disruptive open and close scenario I mentioned before because of all this alone, or a greater frequency. At the current rate of vaccinations on a national level, the American population will need about 7 times more than currently conducted to create herd immunity to stop the virus. There may be vaccines in shortage due to this, but it will take at least until October until we reach the end of the pandemic. In my final points, one of the most infuriating reasons this reopening rush is occurring, and one I feel the most undermined and disrespected by it, is political reasons or gain at all levels of government. Governor Gavin Newsom is facing a recall campaign that will probably end up on the ballot as a special election in the summer. He certainly is moving to reopen schools statewide physically as much as possible in order to not only prevent himself from being removed from office or not being able to achieve re-election in 2022. How dare he consider taking away funding for those who jump or not quickly able to meet his requirements so he may remain in office? How is this evenly supporting education? The same individual who has his own children in private school this academic year, and again violated his own orders to go into a closed restaurant just this past week again, has no credibility or standing to give directives to millions of people at this time. Will the vaccine promises and claims made by him come true also? His political supporters in the state legislation on a different levels of government are giving in to more partisan reasons that concern of general public for fear of weakening their holdings to office. Mounting pressure from parents and adults are factors pushing this board, parents and adults who may not have all the full data, as some I have mentioned, from on-campus infection rates during virtual teaching or a chance to speak or be voiced at a public meeting. This also includes students whose lives are impacted as well. The fact that both neighboring districts, Riverside Unified and Corona Norco Unified, intended to reopen elementary campuses among the first in the county is a pressure also to Alvord, which is directly in between both, is another. Parents may be wondering why, if they are considering reopen, why not Alvord? Each district has a local control for that for a reason, and pressure or competition from others should not be a reason to reopen. There are a great deal of differing factors simply size alone to those locations in the Alvord Unified. A handful of physical schools being hybrid models in our region can only be found in the high desert, east or south of Barstow. Larger districts like both Moreno Valley, San Bernardino, Burbank, and others have voted to remain virtual for the remainder of the academic year. Another district in the southern half of Riverside County already has anticipated date announced to have secondary campuses to return before the waiver process even exists to be able to apply for it. All of this thinking is jumping of the gun and not reasoning based on data or that I trust. There is not much common sense being used in some of these decisions. Many of the communities opening first in Riverside County are among the most conservative and were a year ago those most likely to have members going to the County Board of Supervisors and making claims as mentioned above of the pandemic being overplayed, this virus is not being a danger, or not taking precautionary measures. Why am I and others to trust the judgment of individuals who ignored common sense information? I hope pressure from them is not going to heavily influence this board. I certainly hope as the year anniversary of school closures in Riverside County approaches, it is used as a political reason or platform to be among those to open first. Certainly, I hope not to see balloons and staff being pressured to celebrate a return for only a few weeks, or for publicity and images or mentionings in the press, which have already been done by ambitious leaders in some of the school systems. Some district leaders, such in San Diego, have no problem reporting to the media they have reached a deal to physically reopen with unions and faculty without actually having final details completed or agreed on. It's clear where their priorities are. Politics and appeasing a dissatisfied public rather than evenly evaluating their own local conditions. It's sad to be in a scenario and political climate where trivial concerns such as these to be more important to elected officials than counterproductive measures. I feel that is where we stand, including possibly Alvord. However, the political theater is not just at the state or local level. The refusal of the federal government to, at least so far, to end standardized testing for the year, something we already know should not be used as a measure to fund public education and is harmful to student mental health in general, is being ignored. The last presidential administration ignored general facts about the pandemic, and the newest is slow to react to the crisis. President Biden agrees vaccines should be given to teachers first by states, only about half who are listening, and the time given for all who want them in public education to attain them. I do not believe that the current thoughts of this board are going to realistically allow for that. As a secondary instructor with the district, the fact that reopening with literally only a few short weeks remaining in the academic term is even seriously being discussed, seemingly for political motivation most of all, it has certainly caused me to consider my employment future in a different light. I respected Alvord Unified as one of the districts in the region for greater leadership, progress, and also for community culture. I have worked for the district in the capacity of being an after-school program employee, substitute teacher, rec worker, and certificated instructor. I made a long commute because I respected the district and its values. At this point, I can firmly say I do not have that much I do not have that much experience with the individuals on this current board, but I know already, simply because an item like this is even being entertained for political pressure, I no longer have faith in the decision making. I've already lost interest in continuing my career further with the district next term, and will be actively seeking employment with another body that I feel will better respect families they serve or their employees. Personally, I do not feel I'll be alone in this act either. Many have already left the profession nationwide due to concerns over health issues or losses in respect for those that govern them. Some have willingly given up credentials in states that penalize them for leaving or breaking contracts. Every district is now promising their budgets are strong for this academic year at least, but possibly in the future this will not be the case, and the shortage of teachers and other staff leaving the profession where they will have felt endangered or simply disrespected by a public and media which has vilified their work or efforts is coming to. The last recession caused a shortage of new hires of teachers and declines in recruitments. This may repeat itself again in the current economic climate in California. Please be transparent with people and have no political theater. At the end of this, there is also one other positive fact I can say, is I feel that though in an in-person scenario, many of the scenarios I have described that become highly disorganized or disruptive to the progress I have attempted to make this year or significantly jeopardize my health or those near me. I will be offering my resignation before the end of the academic year, at risk to my credentials or not. Again, I imagine I will not be alone in doing this, nor for those seeking early retirement or moving on into the summer to other positions. I find it very disheartening that just to appear to satisfy some political motivations or pressure in the wake of the most serious health crisis in a century, the need to physically, for literally at most few weeks, be considered first. Many who are studying education also feel there will be a shortage of nationwide, or at least numerous states, including California, being of teachers and similar staff leaving the profession after they feel not supported by district leadership and disrespected, even vilified by the public for decisions they may or may not make regarding reopening or learning. I find this board and other elected officials in different offices to be morally bankrupt at this time, and no one I will be serving under in the future, no matter the decision made at this meeting. Either way, it's likely if you think out your decisions poorly, will join these others on the wrong side of history and be remembered for these failures during one of the worst crises in America in a century. The voters will recall this too, and as will people considering Alvord USD for future employment and how it was managed. I hope you have the basic decency to delay current plans and discussions and minimize the risks and harm this physical reopening will cause. Thank you and regards. Anonymous second instructor at Alvord Unified. I'll now read my next comment. My next comment comes from Bryn Pellegrino. As a teacher and a parent of 3 students who have lost a year of their education and their emotional development to this experience, I implore to you that we let our students return to class. We have had the time to put more than enough safety precautions in place, and for all that we've lost in this pandemic, our students are struggling, and we may never get back to what we have lost. Thank you for your consideration, Bryn Pellegrino. My next comment is from Carolyn Broder. Carolyn writes, good evening. Teachers have been informed that they might be required to teach students online at the same time that they are teaching students in person. If this is going to happen, there are critical details that must be fleshed out. Teaching students who are seated at desks in a classroom is very different from teaching students who are sitting in front of a webcam. Checking for understanding looks very different for each of these modes of instruction. Teachers cannot stand behind a webcam at the same time view the work students are doing at their desks. Teachers cannot stand behind a webcam while making sure students seated at desks are on the right pages of their reading books. Teachers will need to get out from behind the webcams to go around the classroom and help students. I hope you can see why it will be impossible for teachers to provide live instruction simultaneously to in-person and online students for entire instructional periods. Furthermore, it is imperative that all stakeholders have appropriate expectations for concurrent in-person and online instruction if this plan is to be implemented in our district. Thank you, Carolyn Broder, kindergarten teacher. And my last comment comes from Mimi Velasquez. As we prepare to open our district schools, I ask that you, school board members, take a breath to ensure processes for each elementary school are in place and have been thoroughly vetted. That is where my concern lies today. Each of you has assigned schools under your titles. I want each of you to visit your assigned elementary schools to go over every detail of each school opening. This is your responsibility. This is not the responsibility of each elementary school to test each process out and figure it out on their own. This is your responsibility to witness firsthand where our children are going to learn, eat, and play. It is your responsibility to run a test drill at each site to see it will play out due to temperature checks at the door, how recess is going to be safely play out with supervisors, how the scope of cleaning will be with janitors. As leaders, this is where you need to step up and lead. This is not time to rely on excuses of not enough funding and we'll see how things go. As a school board, this is your moment to step up with innovative ideas and creative solutions in tandem with parents and school site. Below are concerns with action items I propose. Number 1, temperature checks must be done at the school sites. No excuses. This is a process in place at many large institutions, including hospitals and Disneyland. To keep our community transmission of COVID low in schools, we must enforce temperature checks at the beginning of the day among students and staff. There are enough thermometers and enough people willing to engage in this process. Anything less than temperature checks at school is negligent. Number 2, socially distant bus pickups. We have a large number of people waiting to work for the district again. We have a huge supply of buses that are idle. Let's utilize all of the buses in the district and put folks who want to work again back in the driver's seat, literally. By having multiple buses on a route, students will be able to ride safely on a bus and have access to a bus because as soon as one is full, the next one behind picking up more students. This is about having socially distant protocols in place in each bus. We have enough buses to make this happen. Number 3, supervisors. We have many of them that are furloughed. Let's get supervisors into elementary schools to give them extra support they need during recess and lunchtime. The normal supervisor ratios are not going to stand up to the COVID safety rules. We must utilize the resources underutilized at high schools and middle schools. All of this is the chance where we give elementary schools in our district all of the resources to ensure this opening is a success. Authorize enough supervisors at each elementary school so that each pod of students has their own supervisor at all times. Number 4, janitorial staff. There needs to be an overwhelming support in this area as each elementary school must be thoroughly clean. Again, this is the moment to bring all janitorial staff from middle and high schools to ensure elementary schools for the boost of the resources and support they need. The status quo will not do in this moment of need. We need more bodies in place to ensure the cleanliness of each area of elementary schools. Do your part and utilize your power to make this happen. There should be no excuses when it comes to safety for staff and students. Number 5, model behavior. Let's have a system where one elementary school's model behavior is mimicked across the rest of the elementary schools. This is the moment where assessing what works and replicating it will do the most good for all. Likewise, figuring out what does not work is something that can be shared unilaterally. As a school board, this is where you can walk the talk. Go to each site physically and help with the assessments. This is where we as a community need you to get out of the Zoom world and go into the physical one since we as families cannot go ourselves. This is not about keeping our children out of school. This is about recognizing the high COVID rates in our district and actively working towards keeping those rates out of our schools. We are nowhere near safe. Purple tier is still purple tier. Don't lose sight of the COVID numbers when you are each making decisions that impact not just the educations of our children's health and the health and safety of our families. Mimi. And those are all my public comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Presby. Now we're moving on to agenda item number 3, presentation of district's reopening safety plan. I'll hand it over to Superintendent Ms. Serena.
Thank you, Madam President. Of course, thank you to members of our community, our colleagues across the district for your comments, and of course our students as well. What I am going to present now is our safety plan in the form of our school checklist, which is what the county approves to provide eligibility for districts to reopen. So let's begin with our reopening school video, which was in last week's roundup and is also available on our webpage in both English and Spanish.
Hi, I'm Lizeth Vega, President of the Alvord Unified School District Board of Education. Thank you for watching this important video on the safety measures and procedures we've put in place in our schools to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 when we open for in-person learning. If everyone protects themselves and others, we can resume normal operations in our schools. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alan Muserino, Superintendent of Schools for the Alvord Unified School District. In these unprecedented times, hard work lies ahead. Alvord schools will play a critical role in rebuilding the infrastructure of our community by providing safe, supportive learning environments for students, employing many people, and enabling parents and other caretakers to return to work. Through school meal programs, social, physical, behavioral, and mental health services, we will continue to serve while we rebuild to overcome obstacles and challenges ahead. We are anxious to safely open our schools for in-person learning and keep them open. To ensure our schools remain open and safe for our staff, students, and visitors, we have adopted a series of actions that we have taken in anticipation of serving our students in person. The actions are designed to protect ourselves and each other. We realize that unless every member of our school community is doing everything they can to prevent transmission of COVID-19 in and out of school, there is a danger that an outbreak can occur when groups of people gather. We invite you to watch and learn from this safe reopening video and the high standards and expectations we are holding ourselves and members of our community to. We're excited to once again work together towards our goals and dreams with everyone's safety and learning in mind. Thank you.
Welcome, Alvord community. We hope you are safe and happy. We're working hard, and our goal is to have our students, to the greatest extent possible, physically present in school. In addition to academic growth, in-person schooling plays a crucial role in improving our students' social, emotional health, physical health, and overall development. And besides, who isn't excited to see their friends again? The guidelines we're following are issued from the California Department of Public Health. Let's get started. Here's what you can expect at school. The state of California has mandated face coverings must be worn at all times by staff, students, and visitors. Social distancing of 6 feet must be practiced at all times. Barriers will be set up when distances are not possible. It is recommended that families, students, adults, and staff take temperatures daily before going to school. There will be handless thermometers on campus to help monitor temperatures. 100.4 degrees or higher should not go to school. Incoming students who register successfully will be directed into campus. Students registering a high temperature will be escorted into an isolation space. A parent or guardian will be contacted by the school to pick up the student and take them home. This is our thermal scanning system, which is located in all of our comprehensive high schools, including Villegas Middle School. Safety precautions including social distancing while waiting, entering, and exiting the bus. Come on! Make sure you head to the back of the bus to avoid contact. The driver will wear a mask and sanitize the bus between pickups and drop-offs. Siblings can't sit together. And oh, let's be nice to each other. Some of us can use a kind word. For safety and prevention, we've disabled our mouth-to-spout drinking fountains. We even installed new hydration stations with filtered water for your water bottle. Alvord mandates 50% of capacity of classrooms leaving 6 feet between desks, while also leaving entry and exit points open for people to move easily through. Adults and staff will be protected by clear rolling partitions that are over 6 feet tall. Clear plexiglass barriers will sit on each desk, protecting students and give them lots of room on their desk. There are many configurations of the plastic barrier. In other areas, privacy screens will be used for testing and privacy as needed. Students may not remove their masks while sitting at their table, even behind plastic barriers. There are a few exceptions. Ask your administrator for clarification. Every Alvord classroom has a negative air scrubber that filters the air every 15 minutes. Stainless steel sinks in classrooms will now have a faucet for washing hands and a filtered bottled water system where students can fill up their own water. Washing your hands is simple, really, and an easy way to keep germ count down. Paper towel dispensers will now be hands-free. All adults and staff are protected by a 6-foot rolling barrier. And it's configurable. Clorox 360 machines are used daily to sanitize classrooms, high-traffic areas, and also safe to use on electronics, including high-touch keyboards. The cafeteria will continue school lunch programs. Social distancing and safety precautions are to be practiced. During lunch and recess, students will be behind polyglass barriers and may remove their face coverings while eating. To further support safe and successful in-person instruction, Alvord schools will provide each student and employee with a SARS-CoV-2 saliva testing kit at home, while Riverside County remains at the purple level or is at the red level. The state of California has established the test cadences that appear on the screen. Student athletes and coaching staff participating in high-contact sport competitions are required to test weekly. Alvord is working hard to safely bring back learning into the classroom. Thank you so much for watching. For more information, make sure you go to alvordschools.org.
And again, that is available on our website. So please feel free to visit alvordschools.org to take a look at those videos, again, in English or in Spanish. You can see all of these yellow banners here are all related to our reopening plans, and all the Sunday night messages could be found here, as well as our data dashboard, which provides current information related to cases on campus. I have a series of slides here that deconstruct the video to go in a little deeper, an opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about what's behind the plan. So a safety plan called our COVID safety plan, known as the CSP, in addition to a COVID protection program plan, which is more geared towards employees, as well as the checklist itself, is all part of one umbrella for safe reopening, and our plan has been approved by the county. Before we move too far along, I want to talk a little bit about Assembly Bill 86. SB 86 and AB 86 are identical bills, and there's an expectation that by Thursday, tomorrow, they will pass. They will be up for a vote tomorrow. And among the major takeaways, that's important because it could very well impact our plan slightly, include the prioritization for vaccinations. That will not necessarily impact our plan at all, but the idea that we would be able to have even more vaccination opportunities for our employees who are interested. The reporting requirements. We already have the highest standard for reporting because our county has a very high standard of reporting, so we'll continue to do so.
Alan?
Yes, sir.
Do you want us asking questions as we go through if we have them on this?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Trustee Swan. Absolutely, yes. I prefer you just ask the question when you see it so it's fresh in your mind and we could answer it for you. I'm sure people who are watching are thinking the same things.
Okay. On that previous slide where it talked about our safety plan being approved, is that a one-time approval, or are there changes that we've got to go back and make changes if they do occur?
Yes, that is a one-time approval. However, if things change, such as the laws, that perhaps a new science suggests that there might be a better approach to doing something we're doing, my expectation is we would have to go back and get that approved. But as of now, once approved, you're eligible to reopen.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question.
Dr. Minister, question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
The next slide. This is regarding the SB 86 and the Assembly Bill 86, correct? If they're setting aside 10% of vaccines for education workers, are they going to be required to take a vaccine then if they want to go back on site?
No. So the reopening is not tied to vaccination. Vaccinations will continue to be purely voluntary. But the setting aside of vaccinations provides at least an opportunity for us to get more of our employees who are interested vaccinated sooner. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Okay, takeaway 2. This bill, SB NAB 86, or to as an incentive bill, because it is in fact being used to provide all of the funding necessary for school districts to open. Those that may have not really had the funding necessary to ensure that all the safety precautions are taken. So in our case, it would be about 13.5 million in apportionment. Districts that open prior to April 1st do get that full apportionment. Districts that open between April 1st and May 15th will get a less than that, dependent upon just when they open. So it's 1% a day, which amounts to about $135,000 approximately for each day after April 1st. Of course, that's not the reason to open schools. The reason we're opening schools, of course, is for our children. But this is something that does come along with it to help support the effort, since, again, there are ongoing costs, obviously.
Now, Dr. Musarino.
Alan, real quick, the 13, sorry, Alan, the 13.5 apportionment, is that above and beyond the CARE Act money, and what can we use that money for, the 13.5 million?
Yes, it is above and beyond, and it's used for both reopening as well as for learning mitigation, learning loss mitigation. Dusty, anything you would like to add to that?
The only thing I would add is that it does take us through and into August to try and provide additional support.
So it could support summer programs, obviously, as well. So we would like to get a jump on learning loss mitigation, so it would support that as well. Continuing on with this particular takeaway, districts that do not provide in-person instruction on or before May will forfeit the full amount of this apportionment. Districts that do not offer continuous in-person instruction from the time such instruction commences through the end of the school year will forfeit the full amount of the apportionment as well.
Now, Dr. Musarino, does this include secondary or just the TK6?
Well, it includes elementary, so it is geared towards elementary. However, for secondary schools, the expectation is that the most vulnerable children will be brought back, even if the middle and high schools cannot be open because of the county's tier. Did that answer your question, Trustee
Yes,
Marino?
thank you.
You bet. You're welcome. A third takeaway, asymptomatic testing. And I know this is something you heard from the comments. A lot of people are very, very concerned about. Districts in the county in the purple tier shall conduct asymptomatic testing for staff and pupils participating in in-person instruction consistent with the state supporting cadences. So that's what you saw in the video, is that when you're in the purple tier and the red tier, currently the testing cadence is every other week. However, if this bill passes, and again, I expect it to go to a vote tomorrow in Sacramento, then the test requirement will not apply if schools open on or before the 31st of March. If the district is providing in-person instruction or the governing board or body of the local agency has adopted a plan to provide in-person instruction, then the testing requirement would not apply. Now, of course, either way, testing is voluntary, even before SB 86, or if it doesn't pass, it's still voluntary. We simply would ask people are families who are interested in signing up if they would like to participate in the program. One more takeaway on the asymptomatic test: in a district in a county that moves from the purple into the red, orange, or yellow tier is not required to maintain asymptomatic testing for staff and pupils participating in in-person instruction consistent with the state supporting cadences. So once again, the assumption is if this law passes that testing will be purely voluntary, and then it will be a matter of whether or not people decide they want to participate, in which case we would be happy to provide the kits. They are take-home saliva kits, and I will explain that a little later in the presentation. Now to talk about the stable group structure, formerly known as the cohort model, Dr. Kemp is going to take over.
Good evening, everyone. When we are able to welcome our students back to campus, we will be opening in our hybrid model in order to follow all of the safety guidelines that have been put forth from the state. So what that means is that no more than 50% of our students will be on campus per day, and at least 50% of them will be at home distance learning. We have split our students into two cohorts, cohort A and cohort B. And we did that by alpha. And if we had families with siblings, we contacted the families to make sure that they were in the same cohort if they wanted to be, or if they wanted their students in different cohorts, we accommodated them as well. So if you're in cohort A, you will attend school on site Monday and Wednesday, and Tuesday and Thursday you will be at home distance learning. Cohort B will attend school Tuesday and Thursday and be at home Monday and Wednesday distance learning. On Fridays, all of our cohorts are distance learning, and it will be the exact same structure that we're doing right now. Students will have the opportunity to engage in office hours with their teachers.
Any questions from our trustees?
The largest question I had is how we were going to make up those cohorts, but Dr. Kemp was able to share that that answer already. So,
Dr. Kemp, I have a question surrounding. You mentioned Fridays might stay the same. Can you give us a visual on what instruction would look like for students on cohort 8 on the days they're home? How is that different from what they're doing now at home?
It's not different than what they're doing now. It stays the same. And so what our students are engaging in an asynchronous assignment from their teachers, and then all of our teachers have times that they're scheduled to have office hours, and so our students have the opportunity to engage in office hours with their teachers to get extra support and intervention that they may need.
And this would be when the teachers are also teaching the cohort B, right? So would cohort B be able to engage on those same office hours? So would our instructors, yeah.
On Friday, there are no students on campus. Students are only on campus Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So Fridays do not change for our students or teachers. No one is on campus on Fridays. They will engage in online office hours. It's exactly like it is right now. It will not change.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Friday is a deep cleaning day as well. So that's, of course, we use the 360 system to disinfect and sanitize every evening, but Fridays is a day that there's no one on campus, so they were able to do the deep cleaning. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide, Dr. Kemp.
Quick question, Alan.
Yes, sir.
Back to the previous slide, the cohorts that you talked about, if they have family members, we would adjust and allow them to be in the same cohort. What if there's childcare issues or transportation issues for certain days? Would they be allowed to change based on that?
We ask that if there are extenuating circumstances, our families contact their principals to try and resolve those issues.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, continuing on the days that students are at school, they engage in the in-person learning with their teachers. And on the days that they're home, they're going to engage in distance learning. And on those distance learning days, there will be quality instructional opportunities that are equitable for all students when they are distance learning. Just as a reminder, we had a survey back in December and families chose whether they wanted to stay hybrid or whether they wanted to stay distant. And so for those families that are not currently in the virtual academy that want to stay distant, we will be honoring that request. And I know that's been a question. So yes, we are absolutely going to honor that request. Our school day is slightly modified, and I will be going through some sample schedules in just a moment so you can see, but it's almost an entire full day of instruction. Principals are going to communicate with their communities and their families regarding all of this information. So please be on the lookout in the next few days and weeks for communication from your principal about your particular school schedule and your particular school site information. For example, how arrival will look, whether there will be staggered times for dismissal. All of that information will be communicated to you by your specific principal. As far as virtual academy goes, our virtual academy is still in session, and their current schedules are going to alter slightly as well because they will match the hybrid schedules so that we have equitable instructional time for all of our students. And so virtual academy students will receive that information when that time comes that we do transfer back to coming back onto campus.
Any questions before I move on to the next slide?
Now, the only thing you had mentioned that principals will be communicating to their communities, that I'm guessing is going to also include the emailing that our principals have currently already been doing, as well as I know a lot of us have been receiving the text message. Will it be all forms of communication, email, text message, as well as our own site? They can read.
Mm-hmm. We will blanket the communication. We will make sure it gets out every way that we can, social media, all of those avenues that we use.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Marino.
Okay.
Next slide.
Okay, the next slide. Students will remain, and this is for elementary while we're in the purple tier. Students will remain in their stable groups during classroom instruction. At recess time or lunches where multiple stable groups may be outside at similar times, each group is going to remain intact and they will maintain physical distance from other stable groups. So they will not be interacting. They will stay in their stable groups while we are in the purple tier. Safe zones in the outdoor recreation areas and lunchrooms are identified with multicolor markings to eliminate any cross-mingling of our stable groups. And additional services like our physical education and our music and our specialized supports, they will also remain virtual while we are in the purple tier.
When you're talking about recess and lunches, our children, they're going to be allowed to play. What is recess going to look like for them when they come back?
Beautiful question. And Dr. DeVore, can you please answer questions about recess for us?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, I'd be happy to. Our principals have been working diligently on their plans to ensure that all of our elementary students are receiving the appropriate time to go to recess. Because recess is not just about play, but recess is also about how our students learn through socialization, through understanding rules and expectations and all of those things. So never think of recess just as playtime, but it's also an opportunity for them to be learning. But as Dr. Kemp has stated, we have provided all of our elementary school sites different colored cones to create colored zones that stable groups would go in. So if teacher A is assigned the red zone area, then that stable group would remain in that large red zone area and participate in an activity assigned to the red zone for that day. That could include things like soccer. That could include things like jump rope and hula hoops. We did provide a lot of equipment for our school sites that can be done individually as well. So there's not a lot of exchanging of equipment and things of that nature. So, and then we will switch out those zones so students have different opportunities to do different things on different days. So they're not stuck in their one zone doing hula hoops for the rest of the school year, but they'll get different opportunities to do different things throughout the year.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
So just to clarify, they won't be throwing a ball back and forth to one another and things like that. That the activities will be self-contained with a jump rope, a hula hoop, and things like that.
Yeah, we try to have them as self-contained as possible, but we are monitoring the guidance that's coming from the Department of Public Health in regards to sharing of equipment. Currently, it does state that sharing of equipment such as balls, as the example that you provided, is permissible as long as we have that in connection to appropriate hygiene practices of our students, which our teachers I know will do, and that is they're washing their hands in between activities. So from going from class to recess and then back to class, they appropriately wash their hands in between those times as well to ensure that there's not that cross. However, we are trying to have more individual activities than sharing of equipment. However, it is permissible in the current regulations. We're still going to be very cautious of that and limit that as well. And then we're also going to leave all equipment that is used open in our open equipment containers that can allow for a 360 at the end of the day as well, that you've heard about a number of times.
Okay. And this is the purple tier, correct?
This is the purple tier.
Okay. Thank you, Emily.
Yes.
Yeah.
Question on the last bullet, well, for physical education, music, and specialized supports, that's going to remain virtual during the purple tier, but assuming that cases go down or that we go into the red tier, what does that look like? Are we ready to pivot if we do go into the red tier?
If we're ready to pivot, we'll be ready to go into the red tier in certain areas that we can maintain stable groups within the red tier itself.
What would that be, Emily? I'm trying to get in my mind, if we're not in the purple tier and we could make changes so that additional services, what would that look like?
Well, you'd have to kind of look at them each individually because they all provide different services, right? So in physical education, we have the ability to potentially have some more in-person instruction because we're able to keep our groups more separate in the space that we have available. Whereas in music, that's harder to do because we have fewer teachers and more kids and they have to share smaller spaces. So that may be more difficult. Or in specialized supports such as our literacy teachers and things of that nature, where there's a small group of students and we may not be able to maintain the appropriate physical distancing within a small group. So each of those are going to have to be very specifically looked at and identified based on their, so we can't just make a general statement about all of the different groups because they all do very different things.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And Emily, thank you for addressing that. You know, there's a number of variables. Obviously, the size of the campus and the space we have available to be able to spread our children out. The population, every school is a certain population. Obviously, in a lot of cases, we have schools that have a much, much larger group in the virtual program. So there's fewer students on campus. And then, of course, the ever-changing conditions of COVID. We're in the purple tier now. That's widespread. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that even though we are considering reopening schools, we are in the purple tier. But we are precipitously and rapidly moving towards the red tier. And as we continue to improve over the course of the year, we'll have the opportunity to relax some of these restrictions as the science suggests and as the guidance allows us to do. So it will constantly be fluid, as everything we do with children is. It's dynamic, it changes, and we respond to whatever the current situation is. Dr. Kemp, back to you.
All right.
So here's a sample elementary school schedule. Keeping in mind, if you're in cohort A, you would be coming to campus on Monday and Wednesday, and cohort B, you're coming to campus Tuesday and Thursday. So if your school begins at 8 o'clock, you open at 8 o'clock, and then you'll go through your school day. You'll have your core instruction, your recess, your lunch, and then student dismissal is at 1 o'clock. So it's just slightly earlier than it is during normal times. And then elementary also has office hours at the end of their school day. So if you are in cohort A, you will be on campus following the schedule. And if you are in cohort B, you will be at home distance learning following a schedule. And then this,
I'm sorry,
yes,
Dr. Kemp, I just have a real quick question. If a child is home, if a child's staying home sick, not because of COVID, but because a runny nose, a headache, whichever, how would they still participate in class if they're in cohort A and they're supposed to be in person on Monday and Wednesday? Would they call the principal and make arrangements to tell the teacher, or they just?
Yeah, if you're on the hybrid schedule and you're supposed to be in person cohort A and you're sick, it's just like any other time that you're sick. You're absent. It's not expected necessarily that you're online learning when you're at home ill. So you would just call in and excuse your absence as you normally do.
Do they have? Can they log in though and not miss that day of an instruction?
They could, sure.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay, when we are able to bring our secondary back, this is a sample of the middle school model. Again, cohort A Monday, Wednesday, cohort B Tuesday, Thursday on campus. Middle schools starting at 7:30 and dismissal is at 1:30. Now for secondary, it's a little bit different. It's cohort A in person has periods 1, 2, and 3 on Monday, while cohort B is at home, and then that will flip. And so on Tuesday, cohort B comes in, and they will also engage in periods 1, 2, and 3, and then dismissal. And then Wednesday and Thursday, we do periods 4, 5, and 6, 4, 5, and 6. And then, of course, as you remember, Fridays are the same as they are now. I'm sorry, you know what? This is high school. I said middle school. I'm sorry. This is high school model. There we go. Middle school. Okay. Thank you. Oh, and then you changed to high school. Okay. Actually, I want to say that I think those slides got mixed up. Before anybody freaks out at home, middle school is not starting at 7:30. Middle school starts at 8:30. So I think when the slides got transposed, the middle school slide didn't get on there, Dr. Mussolino. So I apologize for that. Middle school starts at 8:30, everybody.
Okay, so this is 8:30 instead of 7:30.
Yeah, and middle school, they start at 8:30 and they will dismiss at 2:15.
Okay.
Before anybody has a heart attack. I'm glad I noticed that, yeah.
For the record.
Yeah, right. Okay, and so the high school model is 7:30 to 1:30. Okay. Again, right? So it's the same sort of structure, though. We go periods 1, 2, 3 on Monday and periods 1, 2, and 3 on Tuesday. So both cohort A and cohort B get to be in person with their teacher. And then same thing Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay. Any questions, trustees, on the schedules? But just to review, we have elementary. And again, dependent upon the school, the start time might be later, but these are the hours and the schedule. For middle, this is actually 8:30.
8:30 to 2:15.
So 8:30 to 2:15, and I will fix that on what I send out. And high school is correct as it's on here, which is 7:30 to 1:30.
Yes.
Questions?
So I think we might be getting to it, but are the instructional minutes?
We lost you, Joanna. You're on mute.
Sorry, baby next to me there.
Sherry, you want to talk a little bit about instructional minutes?
Sure, absolutely. So our instructional minutes are actually increased from all distance learning. So our secondary periods are 20 minutes longer each, so they have more instructional time and more time to do intervention within the period. And then our elementary minutes increased by 75 minutes. And so that is why we are changing the virtual model as well. So we have equitable instructional minutes for all of our students in the district.
Thank you, Dr. Kemp. That was actually my question. Thank you for reading.
You're welcome.
Yes. I noticed too that the dismissal is that where all our secondary schools would get their lunch at that point, right? Right after dismissal. That's when. Oh, I see. Lunch is right in the middle. And how would we enforce? That's I think the fear in a lot of just people's mind. How do we enforce face coverings, distance during these passing periods or lunchtime?
Just like we do with anything, we have wonderful students, and we have lots of supervisors and administrators and teachers, and we will let our students know what our expectations are, and make sure that they are following those. Obviously, when they're sitting at lunch eating, they don't have their face covering on, but when they are up and walking around, they will need to have their face covering on, and we will remind them and model it for them and support them in doing so.
And I know from the video, when we showed the cafeteria, obviously we don't have children there, so we couldn't necessarily model what it'll look like. But there's also 6 feet of distancing when children are eating, and they are also in their stable group. But again, we are relying on our young people to follow the rules. Obviously, the stakes are very high, and we're very confident in our kids. So we're sure that our children are going to follow along and do what's best for all of us as a whole. So we will do a lot of instructing early on what those expectations are, of course, with signage and a lot of other reminders, because obviously you're kind of lose track sometimes of things. We will continually supervise all spaces and just remind our children of what those expectations are. But our kids are great. We have few problems under usual circumstances and conditions, let alone conditions like this. I'm sure our children will be very motivated to keep our schools open as well, which will require that everyone follows the rules. Dr. Kemp?
Okay, talking about student technology, our students and our staff have done just such a tremendous job integrating technology into their teaching and learning, and we're not going to let that go. We're going to integrate that into everything that we do now moving forward, and that includes when we come back for a hybrid. So we will continue to use our technology devices and programs for both days that we're on campus and days that we're off campus distance learning. So what that looks like for elementary students, they do not bring their device to class. There will be devices in every single classroom for our students to use, so they do not bring their device back and forth. Those devices will be sanitized with the 360 machine every single night, so those will be clean and ready to go in the morning. For our secondary, middle school, and high school students, we will expect them to bring their devices to campus on the 2 days that they attend school. So we will ask them to go ahead and do that. They're old enough, they will be able to handle that. And then we absolutely expect our kids and our teachers to be engaging in all of the wonderful technology and programs and things that they've been doing this whole time this past year that we've been distance learning, and they've gotten so good at.
As far as the middle and high school bringing their devices on campus with them, it will also be the expectation then for them to bring their actual charging station as well.
We will have power strips in every single teacher's classroom with 12 plugs, keeping in mind that there won't be, more than 15 or 18 kids at a time in a classroom. So, we hope that they charge it before they come to school, but that doesn't always happen, or it might, die during the day. So they will be able to charge their device. And, it's very likely that we would have extra chargers in the classroom if needed, or, in the library that perhaps they could check out for the day.
Yeah, good question. Okay, let's continue. Thank you, Dr. Kemp. Appreciate that. We have Dr. Kemp's team here today. I should have introduced that we have Dr. DeVore, who oversees elementary here. We have Sandy Fielden, who directs student services, and Ian Fish, also in student services, who are here to answer questions throughout this presentation. As far as entering the campus and moving about, we will be symptom screening in the morning, as you saw in the video. We are working with our principals to stagger their drop-offs, both coming and going. Once again, we rely on our principals to work with their communities. Our communities are unique. Some have bus and some don't. Some have, of course, larger populations than others. So we're relying on our principals to work with their communities to do what's best for their community. So obviously we have the requirements as far as distancing and so on and so forth. But short of those requirements, we know that each community will work with the principals rather work with each communities to ensure that we're able to do all of the movement safely. Our elementary students will have a designated area where they will be symptom screened. Of course, at the high schools, the larger schools, we will have the big kiosks. But there's kiosks at all of the schools. They're just different systems.
I'm glad we said that, Dr. Muserino, because in the video, it kind of highlighted just the high schools. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that it was K through 12, that we will be TK through 12, that we will be doing temperature checks on all students as they enter into the schools. Okay, just want to make that clarifying note for everybody.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is no longer a requirement necessarily. The science changed on temperature taken to some degree. Mm-hmm. So again, we're holding everyone to a higher standard, as you saw in the video. We want to make sure that we are taking every safety precaution possible. Kevin, Mr. Emenaker, would you talk a little bit about those kiosks?
Yes. So the video, it really quickly splashed over the kiosk system. So those are going to be primarily at our elementary schools, and there might be multiples depending on their student body enrollment. And then our middle schools, our smaller middle schools, will have anywhere from 2 to 3 of those systems in place. And then once we get to the larger enrollment, where we're talking about upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 enrollment, then we're looking at the larger systems that you saw in the video. And those are going to be all placed at a single entry point on the campus, and every student will funnel through that. Our staff and if there's any visitors, they'll be directed to go to the front office, where they'll get temperature checked and sign in, and everything will be done at the offices. So,
thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
So again, all schools are unique, as I've mentioned a couple of times. So they will establish their systems and work with their communities to ensure that everyone knows exactly what those expectations are for not only students, but for adults as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, face coverings. Of course, everyone has an opinion on face coverings. We are mandated to follow the guidelines from the California Department of Public Health, and all students are required to wear face coverings at all times, unless exempted. And those exemptions are due to medical conditions. We will address those issues on a case-by-case basis. So we expect that our families will start with their principal, and then we'll work together to make sure that we're able to keep your child as well as everyone else safe and still meet the requirements of the essential protective gear. Any questions on this?
I do know that it's, as I'm reading the slide here, it talks about the face shields and things like that. And I know there are so many different variations of masks out there right now. It's my understanding then, according to this slide, the face shield is something that would be for those who could not, had a health issue. We would still be requiring them to wear a shield where it has less restriction for the actual face.
Correct. Instead of it being tight behind the ear, if you have a sensitivity to that, for example, or perhaps if breathing is an issue, then we would look at a non-restrictive alternative. And hopefully, again, just work closely with our families like we do with everything else to find a safe compromise.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. We heard from a few of our in a few of our comments that there's concerns about face coverings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alan, this is
Yes.
this is Dr. Dorado. I'm calling. I know in our comments we also heard some concerns surrounding. We have had small groups, cohorts already in our campus. I mean, it's I've been wanting to make this comment. Maybe it's not appropriate at this slide, but as we look at safety and face coverings and shields, it does come to mind. One of our comments was regarding the potential outbreaks and how some of our staff has had to go home. Can you touch on that as we look at how that would impact a larger school? Some of our secondaries, how would that look like? And we saw something at that level.
Yeah, so we brought back some of our children with exceptional needs earlier in the year. And we did have cases. Of course, this was November, December, when the surge was beginning to really take off. And we did have adults who came down with COVID. And so we did shut down those programs in the middle of December as a result of not having staff, frankly, to go. But as far as the policy, the guidance on a school closure would be concerned, if you had cases, you do have to meet that threshold. And there's a couple different thresholds. There's a threshold specific to the number of cases on campus. Then there's also a threshold related to the number of schools in your district. So once again, we will address that as well in all of our documentation, but that's why we have our dashboard. So our dashboard is currently updated, and when you hit that threshold, of course, you're working closely with the county, then you work together with the county because all the cases are different. It's not one size fits all. There might be a situation where you have multiple cases, but they're not related to one another. Or it may have been in a self-contained group, in which case you may not make the determination that you would close. So this is where we would work very closely with Dr. Kaiser and his team at the county.
Thank you for taking the time to answer that, because I'm sure it's in everybody's minds.
Absolutely is. Healthy hygiene practices. Again, we will do everything we can, from coaching our students and reminding them of the expectations, to having hand sanitizer stations, encouraging hand washing regularly. I'm going to ask Kevin to talk a little bit about our sinks in elementary school and other level classrooms and those sanitation or those hand sanitizer stations. Kevin?
Yes, and so many of our elementary school classrooms are equipped with sinks in them. Nothing that we added or anything. It just the school was built that way. In those instances where they do, we made sure that the paper towel dispensers are all the hands-free, which means they don't have the little turn dial. You can just go there and pull pulled down on a paper towel, as well as they have the soap. But in addition to that, at each of the entrance of all our doors of all our classrooms, we have a hand sanitizer dispenser where students and staff, when they enter a room, they can go ahead and sanitize their hands real quick, or when they leave, they can, get their hand sanitizer that way. And so we're confident that we have all that taken care of. In addition to what we have in the classrooms, we also have the movable or portable hand sanitizers that can be placed in out in the quad area, or in the multi-purpose rooms, or wherever students might be gathering for eating their lunches, or at recess, for example, where you have a large amount of students and you just don't have enough sinks in the restrooms to accommodate all the student body, but we'll have equipped with either 10 to 15 of these portable hand sanitizers that can be moved around the campus as needed.
Thank you, Kevin. And it's important to keep in mind that for contact tracing purposes, it's within 6 feet and for 15 minutes or longer. So there are situations in which students might be in violation of that briefly, but the science suggests that that's typically not when the disease is transmitted. So once again, it's just a matter of reminding our children to keep their distance and to continue to be safe for themselves and others. And again, I'm very confident our children will step up. As far as identification and the tracing of contact, so the contact tracing process, daily screening for COVID symptoms and for exposure to someone with COVID prior to leaving for school, of course, is what we're hoping all of our families would do. And as you heard in some of the public comments, we know that we will all work together, as we have in Riverside County, to lower the transmission by doing the right thing. So we are expecting, and we'll remind families to please symptom screen before you send your children to school. And if there's any reason to suspect that they are not well, to keep them home. And we'll rely on that. We know just from the regular flu that because everybody has been so careful about COVID, that there hasn't been many regular flu cases either. So we know that the science works. So we're hoping everyone will be very diligent about that. If a student does exhibit symptoms, you will have an isolated area to keep them safe if they have one or more symptoms. We do expect students and staff to self-monitor, so over the course of the day, should staff members see a student who may perhaps not be feeling well, then we, of course, will try to separate that child, call home, and try to figure out what the next step might be with this particular child. We have a symptom letter, a parent letter that will go out when we do suspect that perhaps a child has one or more symptoms, and this is something that our nurse team does, and then they will contact the family. There's a return to school protocol. Of course, we are able to provide that home test kit to take home, but of course there's time frames which you'll want to utilize that test. So our nurses will work with our families on exactly how that protocol works. School administration will notify the parents who meet that criteria for close contact. So again, if we identify a student that has COVID, the parent calls, lets us know, then we will go through the process of contacting those that we believe have been within that 6 feet and 15-minute frame. and may very well meet that criteria. And then there's a 10-day quarantine process. It used to be 14 days, and that is now changed to 10 days. And once again, we'll work with our school nurses, parents will, to ensure that the student is then ready to come back to school. As far as just the general contact line list, when we get notification of a positive case, then the registered school nurse who is responsible for that school site it'll be reported to them. They'll report it to the Riverside University Health System. And then, of course, any staff or student on campus who we identify as meeting the criteria of close contact, again, the 6 feet, more than 15-minute rule, then we report that group as well to our UHS, because they contact trace as well. You could find all this information, as I mentioned earlier, here throughout all this information. We constantly update our dashboard as well, so that our families could stay up on confirmed cases for students and staff. Physical distancing, as Dr. DeVore and Dr. Kem talked about, we're going to maintain the 6 feet. We're going to use barriers wherever possible. We're going to keep students as separate as possible, but still let our kids be kids. So again, this is going to be where our school sites get creative. Our principals work closely with their teams to ensure that our children are still having a wonderful social experience, but at the same time being safe. Any questions before we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, Alan, a quick question on that. If we're thinking towards the future, when would that change, or would it ever change that we can see about the physical distancing?
Yeah, it changes by tier, but there's physical distancing. It's the 6 feet will remain throughout the tiers, but there'll be more, just like with sports. It's gone from no contact sports at all to now contact sports, as long as you follow these particular rules, for example. So again, it's going to vary based on the tier, and when we go into another tier, there's usually new science and there's new guidance, typically from the county, that updates the guidance from the state and says, okay, now you're able to do this. So for example, with cross country a month ago, when we were coming down and moving in the right direction, but still hadn't reached that 25-point mark, we were unable to mix teams, like teams competing, for example, against one another in cross country. And then a few weeks later, as it improved, the county relaxed that restriction, so we were able to actually have a meet. Still following the social distancing rules and masking, but nonetheless, we were still able to do more than we could 2 weeks ago. So my expectation is that will continue to happen. And as long as we continue to improve, then my expectation is we will continue to have fewer restrictions. But 6 feet distancing probably will remain for some time yet. COVID testing. We utilize the quantivirus SARS-CoV-2 test kit. And as we mentioned earlier, the current guidance is that right now we're in the purple tier, where last week we were between 7, right now we're at 11 as of Tuesday. So we're right here in the purple tier, which means that schools that are open right now, that opened in the purple tier, I should say, because a couple school districts, or one school district at least opened this week, and a couple others are planning in the next couple weeks. They will have to follow this cadence currently for students and staff. So symptomatic or asymptomatic, everyone tests every 2 weeks, voluntary, however. Strongly encouraged, because obviously the more people that test, the better your adjusted case rate becomes. So your adjusted case rate each week changes based on whether or not you meet the state requirement for testing as a county. So the more people that test, the better. So again, when we get to the red, same thing, symptomatic and asymptomatic. When we go to orange, it's only symptomatic testing and response testing, basically, which means if you believe someone may have COVID.
Dr. Monserino,
Yes.
did you mention in other slides that if SB and AB 86 passed, that we wouldn't have to do asymptomatic testing, even in the red and purple tier?
Correct. So currently, and I'm glad you asked that question because I want to make sure I make this distinction. I may not have been clear. Even with the current guidance, if AB, SB 86 don't pass, testing is voluntary. With SB 86 and AB 86 passing, if in fact that happens tomorrow, then it will no longer even be part of the guidance. Again, we could still make it voluntary just to support the county's efforts to lower our case rate, to provide our employees and our community with the safety and security of having more testing regularly. It's of course of no charge to our families. And it is voluntary. So my expectation is that we would provide it, and those who choose to do it can do so for peace of mind. But my expectation is when that does pass tomorrow, which is likely, that it no longer will be anything other than something that we would provide should our families request that service. Again, going beyond the minimum standard. Okay? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, you bet. Thank you. Okay, here's a video of this system. So if you are a family and you choose to participate in the voluntary testing program, here's what it looks like. So the way this would work is we have the test kits. They're about the size of a small book. And those who want to participate in the program, we would work with the families to do the appropriate consent so that we would have that on file. We would provide the student with the kit. They would take it home, and if the family chooses to to utilize it, then the student would bring it back with them on their next day. So the Monday group would get it at the end of the school Monday. They bring it back Wednesday morning, presumably take it first thing in the morning, and then drop it off at the school, have a drop box, and then we would take the responsibility of shipping it to the laboratory, although you can ship your own. And then the families are notified of the results via email. We are notified as well of the results in our database. That's for the principal's eyes only, so that the principal could follow up with the family to make sure they know that their student tested positive. And then at that point forward, of course, the contact tracing process and all the other things that we would do as part of this process. So once again, if there's any takeaway from this, it is that it's voluntary for families who want to participate. And if they do, we will be able to work with them to provide this service. Any questions, school board, on this?
Yes, Dr. Mastrino. So because it is voluntary, are we going to have a survey beforehand to see how many families are interested, or are we just going to have a certain amount on each site and they're able to take it home at the end of the day if they wish to do so?
Yeah, it's a great question. We will work with our schools to determine. So principals will put out notification, survey, find out which families want to learn about, probably when they're doing their orientation, which most of our schools will do prior to opening. They'll talk about this as part of that orientation, and then set up a way for parents to communicate with their principal if they want to or not, and then we'll go ahead and do the appropriate paperwork. But yeah, I can't imagine we would just get them and have them there, because there's shelf lives on these as well. So we would find out exactly who wants them, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
And all of those results, Dr. Musarino, just for clarification for our families and staff, are completely confidential.
Absolutely. Completely confidential, much like everything in our student information system. The principal will have access, because obviously they will follow up with the family to make sure that they know in the event they don't get that information, just to confirm. But absolutely. Confidence, obviously, the privacy is a big part of why people wouldn't even want to participate in. Food services, we will continue to provide our meals free till the end of the year for all of our children. That's known as the summer lunch program, which we've had all year, or really since school closed, which is a year ago next week, as most of you know. On Fridays, we'll give meal kits for the entire week for the virtual students, since currently they come in at various times during the day, but they won't be able to come on campus anymore, since there'll be other cohorts on campus, and the cohort groups, of course, have to stay pure. So we'll provide a week's worth of food for students virtual, and all of our students for that matter, who want it, on Fridays. The number here for child nutrition, if you have any questions, please call our child nutrition team. They're happy to help answer all your questions. We do not want any family unfed. So between our Alvord Cares program, which has been providing meals for many years to families, and certainly for the last year, even more, as well as our own child nutrition center, we will make sure that none of our families are unfed. So please call. Our after school program, once we're in the red tier, this is again the CDPH guidance. You cannot open after school programs in the purple tier. We are fast approaching the red tier, and hopefully in the next couple weeks we'll get there. We will have the after school expanded learning program. We'll be able to support our children up until 4:30 on the days that they are in school. So in other words, only the cohort that's there that day, the Monday, Wednesday group, could stay for after school Same thing for Tuesday, Thursday. And you could see we're going to have virtual homework help and all kinds of different enrichment opportunities. And of course, we'll feed our children as well. Any questions on this program?
My only question is more so concern in handling the cohorts for expanded learning. Is that going to be very similar to the cones that Dr. DeVore spoke of in regards to recess? How are we going to navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to defer to Dr. DeVore, our elementary school specialist.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. And that's why this particular slide really does include on the very top that this is not available in the purple tier and only available in the red tier. When you're in the red tier, there's different restrictions in regards to students commingling. And so the stable groups don't have fewer restrictions in that regard. So that's why we won't be able to open on the purple tier, because we do have to stay within those stable groups. On the red tier, you have fewer restrictions. However, with that said, we do want to keep our ratios low in regards to which groups are together and to move them into different activities in a very specific and safe way also. And that's why there's going to be a lot of enrichment activities. While they won't be as autonomous or have as much choice as they have maybe in the past, there still is going to be enrichment available for them on particular days, as it's mentioned, such as physical fitness type of things, arts, crafts, visual and performing art type of activities.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Staff and health screening, I'm going to ask Dr. Presby, our Assistant Superintendent of HR, to talk about what we're doing with our employees. Dr. Presby.
Thank you, Dr. Musarino. So for this, we started with our employees long ago when COVID first began. So we've started with these first bullet points here. All of our employees have been notified of COVID-related symptoms and are directed to stay home if they are experiencing any of these symptoms. We've extended the federal COVID leave for our employees that expired on December 31st. We extended that throughout the pandemic as of now. And this would be for any employees who are experiencing COVID-related symptoms or COVID-related illnesses. There's extended leave for them so they are able to stay at home. And all employees, as we've noted throughout the presentation, will have their temperatures taken upon entering any of the Alvord work sites.
Questions?
I just have a real quick question. Are there enough teachers and classified subs to cover positions for employees at this time?
Yes, in our system, there are enough. Finding substitute coverage is always tricky on the day, even in non-pandemic situations. Mm-hmm. We have a list of our subs. They've indicated they want to continue to work. They are participating in the vaccination program that we are working with the county and the state. So as of now, yes, but again, depending on a day or a particular situation, even pre-pandemic, there could be sub shortages.
Great. Thank you.
Bob, if we need subs and it's in the special ed classes, are there special subs that we call, or are they just general substitutes?
No, they're general substitutes. There are different requirements for special education if you go over 20 days. So as long as it is the day-to-day sub, all of our certificated substitutes are qualified to cover any of those classes. In that situation where you would need a specialized credential in special education, that would be for a long-term absence.
Thank you.
Dr. Presby, since we're talking about substitutes, are they going to be participating in a lot of our trainings, like you said, the videos and trainings? So I'm sure they've been subbing right now as teachers are out, if they are out. So I just want to make sure that we have a robust group of team that will be part of all the guidance, right? That if they're on campus, they're fully aware on how to manage, the cohorts, the hybrid models, and that they're up to speed on all our guidance here. Are they going to be participating in additional training so but they are?
They will be participating in the COVID training that all of our employees have done. We've not set aside any specific training as of yet, but once we have the reopening established and when that would be, that would then allow us to get very similar to what we've seen here today in Dr. Kemp's presentation of what that school system would look like prior to them accepting a substitute teaching assignment.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, and contact tracing for our staff, our benefits department under Amanda Benitez has been updating our COVID dashboard to reflect the number of employees who have tested positive for COVID within the past 14 days. Dr. Musarino showed you an example of what that looks like. So again, that's not a cumulative total of every employee who has tested positive. It is an employee at a site who within the past 14 days have tested positive, as that's our metrics we need to use. When employees have been tested positive, they are directed to contact our benefits department so we can do contact tracing to keep everybody safe. In that event, our benefits department will contact all staff members who are in close contact or were on site within 14 days prior to the confirmation of a positive COVID test. So the way that works is we first confirm that there is a positive test. We work with that employee to find out were they in close contact with anybody. That's a different type of contact tracing. But then all employees at that site are notified of the positive test. And if they were in 14 days, if they are starting to feel symptoms, we encourage them to get a test. We will send them a test or to seek medical treatment. And again, the individual that has tested positive, that is confidential and is not shared. Only that there was a positive test on the site. All employees also working on the site, as I mentioned, are notified, as well as both of our employee associations. And additionally, we notify Riverside County Public Health as they need to do their contact tracing as well.
Any questions? Okay, move on, next slide.
So a sample of our staff training that's provided is on the proper PPE use or personal protective equipment, proper hand washing techniques, and then there's an optional training for staff members who would like to use disinfecting wipes or cleaners. And this is what is required for all of our employees who are working on site. Testing the staff. So beginning in November, we started our asymptomatic testing, and this is where all staff members who were working on any of our Alvord sites were sent a test to their house. They completed the test at home, and then it was mailed back in. As a school district, we are only notified that our staff members have taken the test, and unless they've indicated their results will be released to us, that is not released to us. So we are just ensuring that all of them are taking the test, and that they are directed to, if they are testing positive, to let us know so we can do our contact tracing. Now with the reopening of schools, when that happens, all of our employees working on site will do a COVID test every other week while we are in the purple or the red tiers, as was indicated on an earlier slide. And these will be the same tests that our students are using. And we also have a nasal swab test in a backup in case we do need those for our staff members. But we were looking at the saliva test just as the students will be using. And additional tests are made available and we have on hand if a staff member tests positive and we need to increase the rate at where we're testing at a specific work site. Employee vaccinations. All of our employees are notified as soon as appointments for COVID vaccines are available. We are not pre-notified. These notifications go out at all times during the day and the weekends to get all of our employees who would like a vaccine to get vaccinated. And this started as soon as our group, phase 1B, or employees who work in school districts, were eligible to receive the vaccine. This COVID vaccine is not required, but it is encouraged, and we will continue to notify our employees until every one of our employees who would like the vaccine have been able to establish that appointment.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Presby. Any questions for Dr. Presby, trustees?
I think my question surrounding some comment we heard earlier in the presentation. It's my understanding as a trustee that many of our employees currently employed by our district have had the opportunity to provide documentation at different opportunities to determine which type of model they'd be in if we were to return back to campus. Dr. Presby, can you kind of just refresh the board or, you know, the viewers involved on that process and how that took place, and, you know, just kind of timelines on how that wasn't all together?
Yeah, so you're referring to the staffing for the virtual program and the hybrid program?
Right, originally, yeah.
Yes, so as we started last spring, looking into going into 2021, we provided transfer opportunities for all of our employees who were interested in moving to the virtual academy teaching situation. I should say teachers in this situation, moving to the virtual academy for teaching, or would like to teach in the hybrid model. That went out first to be made available to those who had underlying medical conditions, family with medical conditions, or had childcare concerns. We sent that request out over several times. For the elementary school, it took 4 rounds to get the accurate number of teachers for the virtual academy. And at the secondary level, it took 3 rounds, meaning we sent out the notification that there were additional spots after those who were in a priority status were placed. In some situations, teachers did not get their first choice based on credentialing needs, but an overwhelming majority were able to end up in a position of their first or second choice. So we were able to staff both of those programs.
And how has our rounds been to date? Have you, as HR, can speak of as we have anticipated different timelines throughout this academic year, potentially going back? You know, we've been looking at the data, monitoring. Have you seen an increase of need from our staff needing or requesting now that those to be filled based on, like you just said, childcare, medical, you know, different needs? Have you seen an uptick on demand or?
No, we have had that more with our classified employees, as many of their assignments have been on site throughout this entire time, and only in specific times where we were all working remotely. And as far as teachers go, we have not had many requests because we've been virtual the entire time. And so now that if there is a decision to move to an in-person learning model for the hybrid, then there would be an opportunity for teachers who are in those situations to follow our process to request an accommodation at that time.
Since you bring up our teachers or our classified that have been on campus, can you speak a little bit to how that has gone this year a little bit, now that we have, you know, we're all here and we have an audience regarding this? Has our needs at the sites been covered when it comes to classified people that have been working all year and then may have had to have taken time off due to, you know, a family member or themselves having to take medical time off? Can you speak to how our coverage has been throughout the year for the staff that has been on campus?
Yeah. Throughout the year, especially with our classified staff, we have been able to accommodate remote work whenever possible. Some of the classified positions are just not able to work remotely, thinking more of our maintenance department, custodial department, and food service. Those services are required to be in person. So at different times of the year, we have had more people out. And a couple times during the year, we actually had all remote work strongly encouraged whenever possible. And this was when we had 2 of the surges, one right at the end of the summer, and then the one right before our winter break in December, where we decided, not ordered, but decided that it would be better to offer as much remote work as possible, including our teachers. We promoted that, encouraged them to work from home as well, especially when we were going through that surge.
Thank you, Dr. Presby. It's just good to get a visual, because I think if we were to make a decision, we have to kind of see what's been happening at this time and what could potentially happen. You also mentioned testing, and have we had, sorry, I think I missed my question there, but thank you for answering that. I'm just a little bit still, you know, kind of grappling everything. I mean, I could see that there's still probably things that I just want to make sure our staff is feeling. There's still options, right? We have testing, we have screening. But if I come back to that question, I'll let you know. But thank you for answering that.
Okay, anytime.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dorado. Hey, next steps. modifications in the event that AB 86 and SB 86 pass. Then we will modify accordingly. Again, the primary change will be that testing will no longer be anything other than what we choose to provide for our families on a purely voluntary basis. Short of that, it will not impact our reopening plans. And then our school safety checklist. Once the county met the threshold for fewer than 25 cases per 100,000 population, we sent out a checklist to all of our schools and asked the administration to go through all the classrooms and on campus, all the spaces, to make sure that all of the safety requirements and all the protective equipment that we installed are all still there and where they're supposed to be. And we have received all those checklists back already, and we are now carefully going through each. And over the course of the next week or so, we'll continue to monitor to make sure that we have everything we need and everything is where it's supposed to be. So we expect to finish that process within the next week. Are there any further questions, trustees?
I did have a question in regards to busing. We didn't really cover, I know that we talked about staggered start times for the elementary schools. So what are we, or how are we covering busing?
Yeah, well, great question. Thank you for asking that question. So busing, of course, is among the many challenges we face. We don't bus a tremendous number of children, but we still bus children. The bus companies, of course, really slowed down. They laid off most of their workers. So once we determine the start date that we're going to have, then we will get that process in motion. According to our transportation partners, the expectation is up to 3 weeks to get the routes going, determine what students are going to be participating in the busing program. So I can't give you a hard date, Trustee Marino, but we'll let our families know as the process is continuing. The sooner we're able to make a decision and let the bus company know what the expectations are, then the sooner we'll be able to get our children on those buses. Mr. Emenaker, who oversees our transportation department, anything to add to that?
No, I think what you covered really covers it. It's just a time process for our school sites to collect all the data and get that to our companies to go and route the students and make sure that they have adequate buses for each route and so.
Yeah, transportation, much like the supply chain with some of the protective equipment, obviously it got very bogged down in transportation. With schools closed, of course, they laid off their drivers. So it's a major process of getting that kick started. So they will work with us, obviously, and do it as fast as they can. But certainly, depending upon the start date, we may or may not have busing available immediately, but certainly within a few weeks. So we will keep our families informed.
Thank you.
And that's not to say we wouldn't be able to work with public transportation and other means in the meantime.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question, Julie, because one of, like Lake Hills, they primarily, they have 6 buses. So they're going to be reliant on our students getting bused into that school. So thank you for that question, and we need to get that done.
The staggered start times, right? Parents, as it is, drop off and pick up can be challenging at some of our sites as it is. So moving forward, the staggered start time, of course, was really appealing to me when I heard that. And I know that Mr. Emenaker has shared in the past other ideas that they've been talking about already. So busing was just on the top of my mind of parent concern. I know that we've done a wonderful job in the very beginning of reassessing the situation as the pandemic has continued to escalate here. We showed in the video the air scrubber, or the I'm not sure if everyone is as familiar as we are on the board, as we've talked about them and researched them for so long, but we are holding ourselves to a much higher standard than even the guidelines suggest. So if you could just very quickly, we talked a little bit about the temperature check stations, but these air scrubbers, they'll be in each classroom, correct?
That's correct, yes. So yeah, and those are, they're we call them air scrubbers just because it's a little bit easier to remember, but they're negative air, that gets, charged and cleaned and run through the filters and everything else. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. I just know that a lot of our community, when they sometimes hear a video or see a video and hear a negative air, so it could easily go to, what do you mean? So I just really wanted to be very clear that we are holding ourselves to a much higher standard than is even suggested in our guidelines. And just to be clear that that is something that will take and process and circulate the air every approximately, 15 minutes?
I know the video said 15 minutes, but that's, for like a 1,500 square foot, and our classrooms are about 900. So it's probably closer to like 10, 11 minutes. But yeah, it's, so in a class period of 90 minutes, you're talking about 4 times roughly that the air will get changed. So
that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great question. Remember, these are all layers of mitigation. So obviously, the filters, we have a high standard for our filters in our HVAC, and then you add the air scrubbers, you add the desk shields, the barriers. Again, they all pile up on one another, just increasing the safety. Everything we've done really has been in response to all of the many, many emails and phone calls we get, our task force work over the summer, the best science as it's coming down through the variety of different agencies that are providing it. So again, we have continually evolved with this process, as all schools have, and we will continue to evolve once we reopen and have children back on the campus. Once again, knowing that it's going to be a work in progress, we're going to learn things that we might be able to do better as it comes to our attention. So we have great trust in our families, great trust in our teams to be able to make those modifications. And educators, we're really good at changing on the fly because obviously when you're working with children, things change all the time, and you have to always be ready and adaptable.
Alan?
Yes, sir.
This is kind of like an operational question, strategic, tactical, operational. But what if there's a virtual student, but that virtual student's on a hybrid teacher's roster? How are we going to handle situations like that? I guess it's going to be at the school level, but do we have an overall thought process on how we're going to make changes that they need to be made?
Well, that's all in the process of being worked out now, Trustee Schwan. It's a good question. A lot of it's going to be a case-by-case basis, again, dependent upon the family situation. There may be situations in which a family's conditions have changed. Maybe a grandma moved in and they have someone that they're caring for that may be more vulnerable than others, and someone may have to switch a program. Again, we want to deal with it on a case-by-case basis, and this will continue to unfold as we continue to work with our labor partners to determine what the absolute best model will be for our children and our schools.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Dr. Mussolino, as you mentioned, we as educators do pivot or adapt very quickly. Can you speak a little bit back to our cohorts, because that's what I have to go off for our district. We've implemented layers of safety, layers upon layers that make things even safer. And we've learned from, just sports training and the small cohorts we have had. Can you speak a little bit to that tonight about what we've learned regarding the 8 outbreaks we have had? Have they been due to outside Contact tracing. Can you talk a little bit about what we've learned and how we've adapted and what we've learned on these past months regarding our cohort models?
Sure. So, of course, we've had conditioning going now for a number of months. We did suspend it over the holidays because, once again, the surge restricted what you were able to do, and the county said basically no contact for that period of time. But we've since reopened that even to competitions. So we certainly have learned some lessons. First and foremost, we learned that if we follow the rules, that we will not have cases, and that's exactly what's happened. The only cases we've had in athletics have been adults that have gotten it outside of the school setting. They determined that because they were part of a contact tracing process, and they got it from grandma, they got it from brother, sister, or out and about. So we did not spread it within our cohort. So we recognize that if we follow the guidelines strictly, that we could certainly contain any transmission. We also have been studying other schools that have been open in various areas. Once again, knowing that there are best practices. Now, of course, nothing's tried and true because this is all new. But looking at other countries that have been open for longer periods of time, looking at states that have had schools open the entire time, like Rhode Island, for example, there have been a variety of different lessons that we have learned. And they all point to the same thing. Be very, very diligent with the basic rules. If you're keeping your distancing, if you're masking, and if you're washing your hands frequently, those are the three big ones that you could very much contain this disease and keep your schools open. Now, when you add additional layers, such as the barriers, such as the death shields, such as supervision, such as testing, now you're adding additional layers, which just give you a higher likelihood that there will be less transmission. There's no way, obviously, to eradicate it. It's just a matter of containment. So I feel very confident, once again, because of our community and our mutual commitment, that we will be able to reopen our schools safely and keep them open.
Thank you. And I think my question to Dr. Presby came back to me. Do we at this point to date have a percentage of staff or teachers that have taken advantage of our vaccines? I mean, I know it's not mandatory, but do we have an idea of how many of our willing and people that do want to take advantage have taken advantage? Do we have any data to date, more recent?
Not in the data we had from a couple of weeks ago. So at that point, in a survey sent out to staff members, we had 40% of the staff members indicate they either were not going to get the vaccine or have received their second dose or had scheduled their second dose. And then we had about 30% who have at least received their first dose and were waiting for their second dose, and then about another 30 who were still waiting. Now, since then, we have sent out to our staff, and granted, every school district is sending out the same information, but literally thousands of additional appointment times. And since then, I've received emails from several of our staff members who've indicated they either now have their first dose, they either now have taken the second dose, or have scheduled the second dose. So as we get closer after this week, we will go ahead and continue to survey our staff members to see where we are accurately. But as a reminder, we're not tracking this data or trying to see who is vaccinated or who is not. That's not our task here. What we're trying to do is ensure that every staff member that wants the vaccine, we're able to give them the information and what they need to make that appointment to get it.
Thank you. Do you think at this time we, based on the initial data that you have from a couple weeks ago, do you foresee us needing a priority to make our district a site vaccination site based on availability on nearby, in our county appointments? Do you foresee that being a need?
Well, we are still working with the pharmacy in order to host our own vaccination clinic for our staff members. The issue came when the supply was dwindled due to the poor weather in the Midwest. So the supplies that went to pharmacies were rerouted to more of the state and county agencies. So the state and county agencies were able to keep theirs up. We work with the pharmacist every week to see when we would be able to host an Alvord clinic. I do know that every day that number goes down in the number of people who will need to participate in the clinic, but we still want to explore it, especially as it would be one more year for our staff members who've been unable to get an appointment up to this time, that they could have one place to sign up, and we would be able to schedule at least the first dose and then let them know they would be scheduled when their second dose becomes available.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the information.
Any further questions, Board of Education?
Dr. Musser, I'm sorry, I just keep one question after another, but I just want to, I know people are watching, and do you mind reminding our audience at this point, as of today, who in our county has made a decision to move forward and that currently has an opening date?
Well, I can speak, our neighbors to the west, Corona Norco, started this past week with their elementary schools. Riverside, our neighbors to the east, have announced that they will begin elementary next week. But that's the only ones that I know have actually had it board approved. There may be others who have, but I am not aware of those districts yet. But those are the only two that I know about. Of course, we work very closely with all of our neighbors. So that's why I'm aware of those districts. Some districts already had resolutions to not reopen this year. Some of them are now revisiting that because things have obviously changed. So this is very, very fluid, of course, dependent upon what happens with SB 86 and AB 86, then that might change even further. So again, it really is very, very local, and well, it should be.
And the reason I ask is because I want to see, have you received any initial data of how that opening went with Corona Norco? Have you had any initial feedback? And then to follow that, how does our layers of security compare to what Corona Norco has right now? Because I know their plan had to have been approved too to open. How do we compare?
Yeah, I really, they're very similar, Dr. Dorado. They're a wonderful district, as you all know, great district with great leadership, great board. And I know that they have very, very similar safety measures. Once again, there's a minimum guidance from the state that you have to even be approved. So they're pretty much following the same. So they've only been open since Monday, so I can't really speak to how the opening has gone, but I'm sure it's gone well because, again, like all of us, we're all committed to our children and are going to do right by them. So I don't have much more than that at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, just because I think we could really learn from our neighbors, right? Their opening and that initial data is so crucial, especially because I think that's the initial fear, how everything's going to roll out on that very first day. How are kids going to stagger the entrance? It's that initial data that I think is the unknown, right?
It really is. And of course, every district, every school rather, physically is different with variety of different points of enter and exiting. Their makeup of their campus, of course, some have a lot more outdoor space to be able to do lunches outside and so on and so forth. So every school is very, very unique. As I've shared before in this forum, the Western Riverside superintendents, the 5 of us on the westernmost part of the county, meet every Friday for coffee. It's been virtual, of course, of late, but we are closely in touch with one another to make sure that we all are working very closely together. So that's why I say that I know the safety guidelines are very, very similar. We're all following very, very similar measures. Schedule is a little bit different. Of course, you work with your labor partners as far as scheduling, things of that nature. All of your safety procedures, once again, the extremes of which you go are also negotiated with your labor partner. So all in all, they're very, very, very similar. And I'm confident, since we're all committed to support our region and all of our children, regardless of where you live. Any other questions from our trustees?
No. So if no one has any more questions, Trustee Wilson, were you going to say something?
So thank you.
Okay.
Just going to say that we had a great deal of information shared tonight. It was wonderful hearing from our community. After all, we heard from staff, students, and parents, so we certainly had a breadth of participants, which was wonderful. Lots of information I just put out there. Now I realize that's a tremendous amount of information, but nothing's new, right? We've been talking about this since we assembled our task force in the summer to prepare for opening in August. So all this is really is just a refinement, improvements and upgrades based on what we've learned from that time. And as Dr. Pedrato said, from others, knowing that, again, there's successful models out there, and we certainly are modeling ours after the most successful ones.
Thank you, Dr. Mussolino. In that case, we will move on to our action items. For one, consideration and potential approval for elementary schools to reopen for in-person instruction for students and staff in the hybrid program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Trustee Moreno. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Trustee Wilson. Is there any discussion?
Trustee Vega, I do have some discussion surrounding this action item. I want to openly discuss with our colleagues, our board, obviously making such decision. I want to discuss with you, my colleagues as trustees, and make it openly. I know that was addressed in one of our comments that we also, if we were to approve this, would be hosting in-person board meeting. So I just wanted to kind of get everybody's input, Trustee Vega, and just have discussion surrounding that for our families.
Trustee Wilson, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, President Vega.
So I was going to say, I'm not sure if that applies right now for our action item. If we're going off topic, and if that's so, then we can't discuss that at this moment.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. I did have a question for Dr. Mussolino, actually. I just wanted you to clarify why you've chosen the March 22nd date. Why not earlier or why not later?
Well, March 22nd provides us with ample time to put the final pieces in place, knowing that there's still some work to do as far as getting signage up, for example, because you couldn't put all the signs up and the floor like the where we want kids to stand, because they all have a short shelf life. So things of that nature we still have to put in motion. The safety checklist, once again, to make sure everything is working properly. Obviously, we haven't been using a lot of our systems, our HVAC. So we want to get up and running and make sure everything is in place and ready. We want our principals to have ample time to communicate to their parents to ensure that they're going to be able to make necessary plans for coverage for their children. Things will change, right? If this changes everyone's life again. We also want our staff to have ample time to prepare, knowing that it's going to be a different model than particularly our instructional staff, our teachers, is going to be a different instructional model as well now that we're coming back in school. So I think that provides us ample time to do that, while at the same time meets the state requirements. Obviously, the following week is spring break, and then we come back, it's already after April 1st. Although since we're on spring break, I'm sure we could argue that and be provided grace there. But nonetheless, it provides us an opportunity to reopen, and then spring break's an opportunity for us to reflect on that first week. It's a great opportunity for us to say, okay, here's what we might want to do different. Well, here's what we need to do differently. We noticed that movement was difficult here for this reason, here for that reason. We may want to do this differently in the cafeteria. All the little things that, as much as you think this through, this is all new, obviously, to everyone. As much as we've learned those lessons and met with principals from districts that are open, there's still things that come up that are unique to your particular campus. So I think that gives us a wonderful opportunity to get our children back within the guidelines recommended by the state. Gives us a week then to exhale and look at what we did and how we may want to make some adjustments moving forward. And, this gives us, 9 weeks of instruction as well. So practically an entire quarter. So again, I think like we've been doing all year, we're fighting to get our kids back in school, but doing so with the safety of our employees and our community in mind as well. So I think that it's a good compromise given these great challenges.
Thank you for clarifying. Does anyone else have?
Yeah, Dr. Masarina, as you discussed, the timeline, and it does provide an opportunity to kind of reassess, reflect on that first week, and then maybe implement things during that spring break. But as one of our commentators did say, it is an opportunity too, that last big break, where we have seen some, contact tracing happening, and how does the district is going to work that week to really promote safetiness and ensure that when we come back from that long week break, right, where a potential exposure or outbreak could happen, how would we address that, or how do we promote that safetiness, and how do we ensure that when we come back, we're not dealing with, that fear that many parents or families could have, taken a spring break, right?
Right. Well, I think
that's just the concern, right? The concern.
Sure. Well, I think through education, obviously by having the children back, if it was the 22nd, that gives us a chance to really work closely with our families. So we'll have a very engaged community. At that point, we'll be able to stress how important it is that following week that everyone does follow all the same safety guidelines. I don't think it's the same type of spring break as usual, obviously, because clearly these are different times. But nonetheless, it's a good point. And again, this, I believe, gives us an opportunity to really impress upon our families how critical it is that they are very, very safe that following week. Again, these are times in which I believe our community, our families are very, very motivated to get our children back in school and to keep them in school and keep our schools open. So my expectation is that by continuing to educate our families and stress how critical it is, that we'll be able to weather that potential. But you're right, every holiday there's been a surge, but I think this is likely going to be different because so many schools now are beginning this process of opening and are starting to really get the word out of how critical it is now to keep them open. I know everyone would love to have a graduation, and who knows if by the end of May we are able to be out of the tiered system and able to do something for our seniors like we'd love to do.
And I want to agree with you on that point that I don't think our families, our community, our students would really risk that, right? Risk the potential once we're back, risk during that week potential exposure. So I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think, I believe that's the case. I really do. Quickly, if I may, Madam President, I know we're in the middle of the item. I just want to put the middle school schedule, which I mistakenly had on as a 7:30 start during Dr. Kemp's presentation. I don't know how the slides got mixed up, but anyway, nonetheless, it's an 8:30 to 2:15 start, as Dr. Kemp described. But just so everyone could see the visual of that, and I apologize for that error when I put that slide up.
Thank you, Dr. Masrina.
Okay, you're very welcome, and sorry about that, Dr. Kemp.
Okay, yeah, so that was a lot of information. I think I got all my questions answered. Anyone else with more questions?
Not questions, just a couple of comments, Lizette. Coming into this evening, I wanted to get some more information, the latest information we had. And I think as people heard, we had 12 comments that were made at various different lengths and subjects. But they were, some wanted to come back, some didn't want to come back. Some want the safety protocol, some don't want them. So I think from a perspective of, we got a pretty good scope around our district that there's people that are on both sides of what's going on there. But I must say, and give thanks to those who did provide their input, because if you think about 17,000 students, and I'm not sure, 30,000 parents out there, probably more, but we've only got 12 comments here. So to take that time and to give us your thoughts is really appreciated. My specific concern dealt with what I've been hearing more and more about, and that's the social and the mental, emotional contact for our students. They've really been missing that. They've been suffering around that. And the only way for us to help that out is to have them in person. And I think that would be something that we can do to help them, aside from the learning loss mitigation and the plans we have around that already. So I think there's good points, and I want to say I appreciate everybody else that gave the input that we needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Schwant.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Trustee Schwant. I think it's very important that we hear from our community, especially our students who had the courage to voice how they're feeling. And that's something that I know that we all take into account and respect deeply on all levels of public comment. That's what they're there for. And again, we need to work together with our community, our students, and our staff. With that being said, I do think that we have definitely risen to a level of safety and protocol. And I look forward to, as it was mentioned and referred to in one of the public comments, of these trial runs and making sure that we are having all of our T's crossed and I's dotted. And I feel that that is something I'm confident our team is continuously doing and will continue to do as we move forward. But the social emotional well-being of not just our students, but our staff as well is extremely important. And we did hear today from both sides, and we'll continue to hear as trustees in our communities, from our community. And as we do that, it's important for us to share that we take this very seriously. And it is not an easy decision, but it is one that we are confident in making, I believe, after seeing all of that has been presented, not just this evening, but over the course of almost a year. We haven't stopped working, and that's to the testament of the cabinet, superintendent, and our staff. They've been amazing. Our students have been truly remarkable. I sit in awe and amazement at what they've been able to achieve and continue to overcome, as well as our staff. But you definitely hit the nail there, Trustee Schwant, with we have to think of the whole child, as well as balance our staff and their whole being as well. So I appreciate you bringing that to light.
Thank you, Trustee Moreno.
And I'll just be brief because I just want to piggyback on Trustee Moreno and Trustee Schwant, that, you know, when we closed the schools down almost a year ago, you know, on the 13th, we had no idea that it was going to be this long. We thought we'd be back in on after the spring break, and here we are. It's, you know, it's been a very long year, and we have worked together, and we're doing the best. And like everybody has said, the social emotional of everybody, our students, our teachers, our parents, we're just now getting back out into the reality of life, right? We're starting to go back into the grocery stores and things like this, when you're talking to people. And so it's very important that we have those connections with each other and we keep talking. I know my phone, I do want to say I have received several texts. I mean, I probably have 100 texts, and I apologize that I wasn't able to get your questions out to people in this meeting. I will get them answered for you, and you will get them tomorrow by the appropriate staff member. But I know that this is not something we're doing lightly. We have looked into this, and we will. Someone did ask, and I'm just going to say it really quickly. We will be going back in person. Our school board meetings, and we're looking forward to that. But this has been a long year, and we have worked every single day. Meeting this board has been incredible. We have met at least, you know, once a week, if not twice. This week we've met every single night. So this is not something that we're voting lightly on. And every teacher, student, parents, when we vote tonight, you are in our heart, and we are voting for you. And we're hoping we're representing you the way you would like to be represented, because that's where we're at right now. So with that, please know that we are always here for you. And I think we're going to go into a vote now. But please know that each one of us board members have all of our Alvord family tucked in our hearts as we make these votes. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. And can I said it better myself? All the trustees said amazing things. So thank you to our team. I know they've been working really hard. And as I was doing Read Across America this week, I missed our little kids from elementary. And I'm not just going to vote yes just because I want to see them, but I know that we have the right safety measures in place for them to come back. And so I'm excited to see how that goes. So I will be going into a vote now. Let's start with Trustee Wilson.
Aye.
Trustee Schwant.
Aye.
Trustee Moreno.
Aye.
Trustee Dorado.
Aye.
And myself is an aye. Motion passes. Thank you, board. And we will move on to the next action item. 4A2, consideration and potential approval for secondary schools to reopen for in-person instruction for students and staff in the hybrid program. May I have a motion?
So moved.
I got a motion from Trustee Moreno and second from Trustee Schwant. And is there any discussion?
I would just think that I'd ask that you read the recommendation for the motion, so our families know what the recommendation is. Lizette, President Vega.
Of course. So the recommended motion is the superintendent recommends secondary schools reopen for in-person instruction for students and staff in the hybrid program on the Monday following the Tuesday the county transitions into the red tier, but no sooner than Monday, March 22nd, 2021. And Dr. Musarino, if you want to explain that a little bit, great. You're muted.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Madam President. So the recommendation is that once we enter into the red tier, that's on a Tuesday, then you have the 5 days, much like when we met this set 25 threshold, it's 5-day window, and then you have 3 weeks within that window to reopen your schools according to the latest requirement that would not change with SB 86 and AB 86. So we would open no sooner than the 22nd, but if we were able to move into the red tier prior to that week, so for example, on the previous Tuesday, the 17th, then we'd be eligible to open on the 22nd. If not, then obviously we have spring break and it would have to wait until we return from spring break. But because we're on spring break, I do believe we would be able to petition the state for funding. Although, again, I'm just guessing that would be the case.
Thank you, Dr. Masurino. So everyone understands the recommended motion, correct?
Yes.
I understand it, but I have a question around it. Alan, for clarification, if we're voting to open up at the elementary level, how come it doesn't automatically include the higher secondary?
Secondary schools cannot open in the purple tier.
Okay.
So they are not eligible. You don't become eligible until you're in the red tier and you met that 5-day threshold. Much like, remember when we were eligible to open elementaries because we hit the 25, under 25 threshold, and then we were in that for the following week, and then schools are able to open as recently as the day after that, which was last Thursday.
Great, thank you.
Any further discussion or comment?
No.
Okay. In that case, I'll call for a vote. Trustee Wilson.
Aye.
Trustee Schwant.
Aye.
Trustee Moreno.
Aye.
Trustee Dorado.
Aye.
And myself is an aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Yay.
Thank you, board. And so I guess that ends our meeting. We will be adjourning. Oh, Dr. Masurino.
Thank you, Madam President. I will send the board brief out this evening with the announcement to all of our families, our children as well. And that will include a thought exchange. I'll go ahead and get that prepared as well. So sometime later this evening, tomorrow morning at the latest, I'll provide that thought exchange, and the thought exchange will simply be people's feelings about the decision, so that we'll be able to gather those thoughts again as we plan it. So our families could look for that tonight or tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Masurino. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I know it was a long night, but thank you so much.
Just one more thing, I had something in the chat room, just a reminder that, again, part of our plan from the start was for choice. Right? We certainly offered our families the opportunity, as well as staff, to choose what was best for their families. We asked again at the semester, knowing that there were great challenges with changing up things halfway, because we didn't want to disrupt anyone's life any more than has already been disrupted. So our families do, of course, have choice, and given that, I believe that we feel good about the fact that if in-person instruction does not work for you and your family at this time, that we certainly respect that and will continue to provide quality instruction remotely as well.
Okay. All right, so now we're good to adjourn the meeting. So I will be adjourning this meeting. It's at 8:11 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.